up and coming. But first of all, today, like you say, the Premier League just kicked off, and best league in the world as far as I'm concerned, the Premier League.
We'll get into that. We'll get into lots of elements of it. Let's start with the game today. No real surprise in the result. Liverpool gets the big win. I'm glad Norwich came in and tried to play. I'm glad they didn't come in and just park the bus. I think that gives them a much better chance of staying up, which is not a guarantee for them. But I'm glad they gave it a shot, but they're not in Liverpool's class.
No, absolutely not. But it's always tough as a newly promoted side. As a Reading fan, I know all about getting promoted into the Premier League and the struggles that they face. But I think you're right. Norwich played some quality football, and they got the well-deserved goal at the end, which is good for them. Liverpool coming really as they finished their season, coming in strong, obviously coming off a Champions League win, and they came in dominant, 4 goals in the first half. But if you're a Liverpool fan, maybe you're a bit disappointed that you maybe took the foot off the gas, you slowed down, and obviously conceding a goal, you're disappointed with that. And then the one concern you have to have is about the injury to your goalkeeper.
Yeah, that's going to be the big story coming out of this one is any updates on Alisson, the goalkeeper. It didn't look good because it's one of those scenarios where it's not a contact injury, it's not something obvious. Sometimes those are the ones that can be the biggest issue going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about that all the time. Sometimes when it's contact, you can think that it's just a dead leg or a bruise, but when you pull up after taking a goal kick, you have to wonder whether that is a pull, a strain, or something worse in a tear. And goalkeepers are always exerting so much energy when they kick the ball. I think people forget. They think that goalies don't use their legs as much. It's all about the upper body, but it's not. Those goal kicks are 100% energy, and you're constantly, putting 100% force into it. So any sort of strain is really going to impact the way that they play.
And what's, I think, a little more complicated about this one for Liverpool is it's not like they've had another goalkeeper get a lot of minutes. Last season, Mignolet didn't play at all. You didn't see anybody else play. This season, you have to turn to Adrian in his first appearance with the team straight away. Luckily, I think, stylistically, he's very similar. So you're not going to have that big change. He can play with his feet, and you have to do that for the side.
Yeah, I think they've deliberately recruited a goalkeeper that they can slot in their style. But at the same time, like you say, Man City hasn't been a team that wanted to rotate their goalkeepers. Oftentimes you see clubs trying to put goalkeepers into cup competitions, into the FA Cup, into different areas to get those minutes, but they weren't that team. They wanted the same consistent goalkeeper, which I think is a good thing. They trusted their goalkeeper. They wanted that sort of unity in the team, and this is a concern. And I think if you're a Man City fan, as much as it's a good job that they strengthened the squad over the summer, but you are concerned because Alisson's a cracking goalkeeper and he really suits their style of play.
Yeah, 100%. So we didn't really learn anything new today. It's about as expected as you can get with Liverpool winning big. We'll see how the rest of the matches go tomorrow when we get into the season. So let's talk big picture here. One of the things that's fascinated me about the Premier League over the last few years is, when I started to watch it on a regular basis, when it was on TV here all the time, it was the Big Four. And that's what we knew, was the Big Four. That's what the Premier League was all about. Then you started to get Manchester City and Tottenham easing into it, and it turned into a Big Six. Now, is it a Big Two and then a next four?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's so interesting how the Premier League has developed over the years, and we're surrounded by Man City fans, so I probably don't. I want to be careful with what I say, but I remember, again, I use Reading as my sort of knowledge base because that's where I grew up. But Man City weren't a team to beat. They were a team that you felt like you could compete against in the season. It used to be that when you looked at the schedule, you were scared of playing the Man Uniteds, you were scared of playing the Chelseas. Now, Man City is the one that every new team promoted is fearful of, but also excited to have an opportunity to upset a giant. And I think you're right, Jason. What's really interesting is how that has developed, how it has changed. And I would go on and say that I definitely think it is sort of a Big Two. When you look at anyone's predictions for when the Premier League is going to end, it's either Man City or it's Liverpool. Those are what the two obvious choices.
So let's put those two to the side for just a second. If anyone is to challenge them, if anyone is to give a run and make it a 3-horse race, if anyone's to be the Atletico Madrid here in this race, Is it Tottenham? I mean, is that the obvious one?
That would be my choice, just based on that it's a young squad that has now... They're not a young squad anymore. There's no more excuses. They're not able to say that they're youngsters that are getting used to playing against each other. They've got arguably one of the most prolific strikers in Harry Kane. They've got a brand new stadium that also gives them a boost. They've got some quality players on the field, a good coach, but this is really their big test year. I think anything other than third would be seen as a failure for them. And if you're a Spurs fan, you're hoping to push into that big two. But realistically, from a standoff point, I would say if they don't finish third or above, they failed with the quality that's in that squad. But as we saw last season, if they can't keep their squad fit, that's when the problems come in.
They have spent some money this time around, and you go through what you did last year on one side where you didn't spend, you didn't strengthen the squad, but you get to a Champions League final. You have one of the best managers in the world in Mauricio Pochettino. If what you say happens, if let's say they don't finish third and it's a failure, is he gone? Does he leave of his own accord?
I think he leaves on his own accord, almost like he's done his best and there's not much else to do. And it's a tough one, but there's a lot of pressure from Spurs fans. They've sort of become now expectant. They see the quality on their team. They see that they've got these international players. Yes, they lost Trippier. I think that's a huge loss.
I do, too. A lot of people have glossed over that one.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, I think that's a massive loss.
Trippier was such an asset to the England squad in the World Cup, and he was a fantastic player for Spurs, and I just think that that's not easy to replace. And when you make such a drastic change to your back four, you don't just slot in pieces of the puzzle. You're glossing over it. Yes, you have some talent, but we've seen Harry Kane got hurt at the end of the season, and
right.
what a loss that was. And you can't be over-dependent on certain players, and that would be where my concern is with Spurs, that they maybe have a great starting 11, but do they have the squad depth if things go horribly wrong and a couple of starters get injured to carry out what will be a long season with the Champions League as well?
Yeah, I do really like their signing of Giovanni Lo Celso, the Argentine midfielder. I think he's the perfect kind of fit, a Pochettino type of player. They should be third. All right, so now we've got the top two, and we'll put them in an order here in a second. We think we know who three is. You've got three more that are in the conversation to be in part of that Big Six. Do any of them stand out to you?
Definitely not Man U. That would be the one that I have the biggest fears about. I think the transfer window for Man United was horrific.
Are they the biggest question mark in the Premier League?
For me, yes.
Because I don't know what they're going to do.
I think they planned their transfer window horrifically with Lukaku dropping out last minute. That was a shock. And I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has the hardest job in the Premier League right now with the biggest weight on his shoulders. And I'm not a betting person, but if one manages to go soon, I think Ole might be the first out of the door this year in the Premier League. We
were talking about this beforehand, and it's there's a couple clubs in this kind of scenario where I get why, one, they turned to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I totally understand why he got the appointment. He had an amazing run as the interim. I feel like they had to give him the job. Yeah, based on his record during the interim run, you had to. And you must say that the players were playing for him at that point. And maybe based on how much detestment there was at Mourinho, that helps. It was a foil. You know? Get a new manager bounce, definitely. And it slowed, and there were some unfortunate circumstances, but I think you have to try and trust him. You have to try and have faith in him. But he's a young guy. He was a fantastic player for Man United, and maybe that's what buys him more time and patience, because you cannot screw over someone that was a legend for Man United like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Very, very key, because you have another club legend in a role that I wonder how he's going to do in Frank Lampard at Chelsea. Lord, that was a crazy appointment in my eyes. I mean, he did a cracking job at Derby. Yeah, he did. Absolutely brilliant job at Derby. They, obviously, in the playoff final, got pipped to the post by Aston Villa. But he is a young manager, and he is new to it. And there's one thing managing a championship side. There's another thing managing one of the Premier League sides that has some huge expectations on their shoulders. I think he'll do a good job. Again, the players definitely have the respect for him. The fans have the respect for him. Probably the people higher up have respect for him. But it's not going to be easy. No, and with the transfer situation, I think, again, it's the right appointment because Manchester United was further down the road of losing their identity, and they had to turn back to what their glory days were.
That was the appointment, wasn't it? It was one of those, like, we're still Man United.
Yes, and they needed to say that because I think they had completely lost who they were. Chelsea hadn't gotten to that point, but you were at that risk where it's just manager after manager after manager and no real connection.
It's a lack of consistency, and it becomes sort of like a poison chalice.
Yes.
No one wants to take a role where no manager has lasted a consistent period of time. I'm not going to dent my career like that.
Would you want to replace Maurizio Sarri after he was not a poor manager by any stretch? In Italy, everybody was fighting themselves to get him back, and they ran him out of the club.
Yeah. The fans are ruthless. The higher up board is ruthless, and it's not a job anyone wants to touch. But maybe with Lampard, he kind of has that cushion and that he feels comfortable with the club, and he knows he's almost protected to an extent.
That's so key, and I think Solskjaer's in that to maybe a slightly lesser extent, but both of those guys are going to get time.
Absolutely. You don't rush into a decision like that because deep down, you know that player that was a hero is going to be somewhat disillusioned with the team forever. It's not a forgivable thing to be fired by those who used to be your employer in a different way.
So the other team in the Big Six, Arsenal. What'd you make of them in the offseason and them coming into the upcoming season?
I've seen some pretty good play. They've got a very exciting forward line. I think Arsenal's going to have no issues going forward. I think they're going to have no issues scoring goals. There's a little bit more concern about the back line. We saw a good last-minute addition in David Luiz.
Ooh.
I have no idea.
That's
baffling. That reception in Chelsea versus Arsenal for David Luiz is going to be absolutely incredible.
That's what you turn to at the last minute. You go get David Luiz.
It's like a stab in the back, though, isn't it?
Oh.
I think they were just trying to frustrate the Chelsea fans. Look, David Luiz is a quality defender. We can't argue that.
True.
But he is so prone to defensive errors. He is so inconsistent. He's almost like an LGP, to use Atlanta United terms, that, like he wants to go forward in some ways, and he takes those risks and turns over the ball, and that's not what Arsenal needs at the moment. Arsenal right now is begging for some defensive stability. They're begging for even just playing it simple out the back and just keeping it compact. David Luiz isn't going to offer you that. David Luiz is going to offer you this big picture, forward-minded defense, and there's going to be errors.
I don't think it changes anything. I don't know if Arsenal changed anything from where they were.
No.
They feel like the same team.
Yeah, and that's why I think they're going to struggle. And Arsenal became predictable almost. Mm-hmm. When opponents were playing against them, I think they knew what Arsenal was going to offer, and they sort of figured them out. And that's a concern for Arsenal. They need to find something that makes them unique again. And they need to get back to the glory days. It's another team. It's so interesting when you look at the change. When I look at teams that 10 years ago were like idols, they were the most incredible teams. Now, we're wondering whether they're going to make it in that top six.
We'll get to who could push somebody out of the top six in a second. Let's go ahead and talk the top two. Let's go ahead and get there.
And just to be anyone listening online, we're surrounded by Man City and Liverpool fans. So this is a tough one.
We're being stared at by Liverpool and Manchester City shirts as we go into this. All right, here's what I love about this situation. You have two managers who I think are two, if not the two best, two of the best five in the world.
Mm-hmm. I'd say that's a
and
fair
very
one.
different. I mean, yeah. I like that. I think they bring the best out of one another.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very contrasting when you watch them coach on the sidelines together. They have very different approaches, but they suit their clubs and they suit the players that they have. And the most important thing is, again, we mentioned it before, it's so important that the players want to play for their managers and respect their managers, and there's no doubt in this case that they do.
They've created identities, and they've definitely become part of their club. Now, which team's going to be better this season? Last year was an epic race. Manchester City is going to try to do that again. I wonder how European competition factors into it. I wonder if that becomes a distraction for either one. Is it going to be as close as it was last year?
It's a tough one. Like you say, I think how much either team prioritizes Champions League will be the deciding factor. We've seen how Pep has said that to Man City, the most important thing is the Premier League. Do I believe him? I'm not sure. I think after getting so close to a Champions League and falling short, I think he wants revenge on that, and it's a trophy he's left to win. I also think from the upper staff that if he doesn't win a Champions League, that might be looked down on.
I wonder about that. It's an interesting situation because when Manchester City started to become the Manchester City that we know today.
The rich Man City.
Yes. They identified Pep Guardiola then. They knew that that's who they were going to hire. That's what they were going to do. Everything was put in place to eventually get Pep. They hired his friends from Barcelona. Like, it was all
very tactical,
destined to happen, and it did. I don't think there's any pressure on him in that way. I don't think they're going to run him out.
I don't think his job's on the line, but I think it's more of one of those where it will be a disappointment. This is a Man City team that they all believe could do, a quadruple, I guess you would call it. They have the quality in them, but you have to prioritize one of them. The schedules are crazy. They're not MLS crazy per se, but they are crazy. It's back-to-back games, and you will burn out. So you have to start to pick your battles because squad rotation is going to happen, and it's whether you play your strongest team in the Champions League or you play your strongest team in the Premier League. Yeah, it's a really tough balance. I think the one thing I feel safe in predicting about this upcoming season is that the point totals won't be as high for the top two. I don't see that happening again. No, I think that was a year to remember. Last year was just something that was so insane. To be winning so consistently, it was remarkable seasons for both of them. And honestly, when I look to the end of last season with both European Cups being filled by English sides, we talked about this a while back, what an amazing statement that makes about English football. And for a long time, a lot of focus has been on the Spanish leagues. There's been a lot of focus on Bundesliga. There's been questions about whether the Premier League is as strong as we think. And they made a statement last year, and I think they'll still be fantastic teams, but I think you're right. It's not something that's easy to repeat. No, it's very hard to see that happen with two teams pull away that way. And I think Tottenham and Chelsea and Arsenal and Manchester United can cling on a little bit closer this time.
Yeah, a little, especially Tottenham. I feel like Tottenham could be the one that makes it a three-horse race for a while.
I hope so, because if you're a neutral and you don't have a horse in that race, it does make it so much more fun when the results are closer. And you just mentioned about how you think the level at the top is a lot closer, but I want to ask whether you think that as a whole the Premier League is that much closer this year.
I think in some ways it is, and I think in some ways you're starting to get some real separation between the tiers. I think in the top six is closer, and maybe a top seven if Everton does what I think they might do, or some people are thinking Wolves could be that team. I think you might have a seventh that keeps it tight. Then I think the middle tier is pretty tightly packed, and then there is a bottom tier. I think there's separation between the tiers, but there's more competition within the tiers.
And that makes it more exciting. We've talked about pro-rel battles in MLS, and one thing that is exciting about Premier League and English football as a whole, obviously, is the fact that even if you're not in that top six battle, there's other battles to fight. Your season isn't over just because you've had a mediocre season, because if you're in middle table at Christmas, guess what? You better start performing or you'll be dragged into a relegation battle.
Yeah, and we saw that last year. The relegation battle extended pretty high up the table for quite a while, which I didn't expect to see. All right, so every expert has got Manchester City and Liverpool at the top, and the majority have Manchester City winning it. What do you think?
Yeah, I do have Man City on the top just because of how they played last year, and with Pep saying that he really wants to focus on the Premier League, if he's to do that, I think Man City and the squad depth is unstoppable.
Yeah, I do think that's what they go for first. I think Manchester City, and it's something I want to explore as we talk to some of the different supporters groups from all over the Southeast who will be here tonight. I think the club as a whole wants the Champions League more than anything. But I think Pep wants the league. And he's consistently said that everywhere he's been. He said it at Barcelona. He said it when he was at Barcelona B. He said it at Bayern Munich. That was what he cared about. He looks at the Champions League as a little bit of a coin toss, a little bit of you need some luck.
It's true.
Yeah, it is.
There's a difference between league play and cup competitions. Yeah. At the end of the day, league play is the biggest compliment in the world. If you win a league, it means that you have performed consistently better than every other team in that league. winning a cup, all it takes is one team to have a bad day, a poor decision, just an off 90 minutes or just a fantastic 90 minutes from the underdog. It's not about consistency.
Yeah.
So I would tend to agree with it. We've gone into the battle again with MLS versus the MLS Cup versus, the Supporters' Shield. And I'm always a traditionalist. I think that consistency and a Supporters' Shield should mean more. So I'll agree with Pep on that point.
So how wild would it be? Let's go to Fantasyland for a second. You have MLS Cup-style playoffs in the Premier League.
Oh, Lord.
And you have the season, you have the title, but then you have a playoff where it's 1 versus 8. So let's go ahead and say it's Manchester City and Wolves in over 2 legs.
It's incredible. Honestly, it would be a cool thing to see.
Amazing.
And this is how I would pitch it. I wouldn't pitch it as like the Premier League Cup. I would pitch it as some special spin-off sponsor event.
Turned into something like this.
And
that'd be amazing.
It wasn't as important as the Premier League, but it was still a cool thing that teams were awarded for doing their consistency. And then you don't have the argument that it's all luck.
Right.
Because to earn your spot, you had to be the best 8 out of 20 anyway.
It would be fascinating to see.
Maybe we should pitch something to a sponsor.
Throw a sponsor at it, put on some money behind it, and that'll happen. That's the world of football. We know this. I think Manchester City wins it. I think Pep takes it as a personal challenge.
How many points difference?
5.
Yeah,
I'm kind of feeling like that.
5.
I don't know if it comes down to the final day. I think for Pep, and the more that I've studied Pep Guardiola and kind of the way he thinks about the game, if you haven't read the 2 books that came out about him, one about his first year at Bayern Munich, it's almost like a behind the scenes, and the second is kind of his last 2 years at Bayern and also as he was headed to City. It's a fascinating look at the way he sees the game, and I think he has massive respect for Jurgen Klopp, but I think he also loves the challenge of beating him because he knows Klopp sets up a team to destroy everything that Pep wants to do.
Yeah, and they have those contrasting philosophies, which he has that personal vendetta to prove that his ideology is better than Klopp's.
It comes down to the ideology, and I think that's why the league will always be more important to Pep because, now if they face each other in Champions League, then all bets are off and everybody's watching because it'll be some of the most amazing soccer in the world. But I think it's all about proving that you can play the way he wants to play over a full season and be better than everybody else.
And that's the most important thing, isn't it? Consistently winning games, and maybe fans should see that as being a bigger deal. You want to watch your team perform week in, week out in the Premier League, and particularly if you're in America. You're getting up at 7 a.m. to watch games. You want to see your team consistently win, score goals, and that's why the Premier League's better.
All right, so we're both on the same page. Manchester City winning, Liverpool second. I think we're both Tottenham third.
Yep, I would say so.
Who's 4?
I'm going to go with Chelsea.
Really?
I think David Luiz made the wrong decision. He'd finish a spot higher if he'd have stayed with Chelsea.
Ooh. I'm really torn. I don't think it's Manchester United.
We're both agreeing on that one.
Yeah,
Man U's dropping off.
I don't see them there. I think it is Chelsea and Arsenal. I'm also not going to rule out Everton. I'm really not going to rule out Everton as a 4 because you might get some teams beating each other up. I think Moise Kean could be the signing of the year. Mm-hmm. I have no idea why Juventus let him go for the amount they let him go for. I think he goes to Everton and is amazing. It's how long does it take him to be amazing? That's the question.
Yeah, finding his footsteps. You need him to, run into the Premier League. It is an adjustment. It's a different style of play. It's a different mentality. It's all about finding his foots early. What I like about Everton is I think they're kind of like that silent assassin that no one kind of looks at. They don't necessarily prep for them. They're not doing their research on Everton because they're just kind of floating. But then they perform. I remember watching several of their games last season and being absolutely fantastic. And I think they're often overlooked. I wouldn't go with 4th, but I think they're the most likely to break ahead, and I think they might finish above Man U.
That's my bold prediction of the year is Everton 4th. I think they get ahead of Chelsea and Arsenal, and Manchester United's out of Europe.
Yeah, I would say that Man U might not make Europe. I think it'll be a struggle for them. They just had, like I said, twice already, they had a dreadful transfer window.
There's just too many questions. Mid-table might be a little much. I think they'll be above 10th. Oh, see, now there's a lot of talk. Watford and Wolves are another two of the underdogs that everybody
I love
likes.
Watford, obviously coming from
Yeah?
Watford was
my
my closest team as a kid, and I was always in those Watford-Reading battles, but I think they have a lot of heart. They play with a lot of heart. They were often mocked for being sort of the plastic team. They have a lot of children at their club, but they do have that family club mentality.
It's different, yeah.
It's a different thing, and sometimes you need that difference. And you saw them make the run in the FA Cup. You saw them perform well, and I think they're one that I don't see them breaking the top 6 at all, but I think they'll finish in the top half.
Okay, so we're hearing an 8. Would you put some juice boxes down on Watford in 8?
8 or above, yeah.
8 or above?
I would.
Okay, fair enough.
Juice boxes.
Yeah, juice
Not
boxes.
too much
Always
of a
juice
risk.
boxes. Yeah, always juice boxes. All right, so we've talked the top. We've talked a little bit of the top of the middle. Who's going down? We always have to go to this next.
Look, so I read some stats before I came, and what's really interesting is that only once has all 3 teams that got promoted gone down
Only
right away.
one time?
I think it was once or twice. Like,
Okay.
very,
Very rarely.
rare.
Okay.
Usually one team makes it, one team thrives.
Okay.
I think this year that team is Aston Villa. They've spent a lot of money,
Yeah.
absolutely tons of money. We've seen it go wrong. We saw it with Fulham a few years back. Spending money doesn't always equal performance because those players have to be bought with the right mentality to play for your team. They have to be bought into the right system. So we need to watch a few games of Aston Villa before I solidify this claim. But I would say out of the 3 promoted teams, Aston Villa will stay up. Another thing that, again, I'm going to blame my dad for this, but my dad's always said that the team that gets promoted through playoffs often has the best chance of staying up. I think they have this sort of last minute kind of push. It was like an exciting thing to get up, and they want to sort of prove that they deserve their place there.
Right.
They haven't necessarily had the easiest season, but they've come back, they've fought, or they've been knocked off right at the last minute, so they have a chip on their shoulder.
Right.
And I think that's exciting. I hate playoffs. Reading's had some heartbreak in the playoffs during my lifetime.
This
but
is true.
I would like Aston Villa to do well. They've got John Terry, of course, as an assistant coach. He's got some potential there as a first-team coach one day.
So am I crazy when I told somebody earlier, we talked about Lampard and Solskjaer and what the shelf life is for them and the pressure they're under. If Lampard fails, let's say it just doesn't work, I think he'll be fine. I think he's going to get a couple of years at least, and I think he'll do well. But if it goes south...
Is it John Terry next?
It's got to be, right?
I think Frank Lampard and John Terry as a little
together.
matchup. I think he could potentially want to pounce him and his right-hand man.
But who's in charge with
and
those two?
That's the one thing. It would have to be like a co-coaching role.
Yeah, that would be unique.
You saw it at Salford City, actually.
That's true.
Salford City had a co-coaching role. It was interesting. I remember watching the documentary. I'm not sure it was too nice, the co-coaching, but... Maybe buddies reunited one day, but I think that'll be an interesting game. Watching Chelsea versus Villa again. We saw them on the sidelines together at Wembley in the playoff final. That was a hard one to watch because you know those guys love each other.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Coaching against each other must be tough.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with you. I think Villa stays up. I worry about our friend Miguel Almiron and Newcastle.
I mean... Can I say Mike Ashley, he's pretty famous for screwing up a club in that one.
It's unbelievable,
It's sad. It's sad because Newcastle has so much history. Newcastle has such a rich history and such a quality supporter base. The Northerners, they're crazy, but they love their football. And it's sad to see the demise of Newcastle. You've seen him put some money in his pockets. It's very begrudgingly, begrudgingly.
Didn't he, take money and go and try to, build back up a music chain, like a CD store chain or something?
Probably
something
was it
bizarre?
HMV?
Something
Probably.
like that. It's
that sounds like him.
Yeah, I mean, are you going to laser discs next? I mean, what are you doing? You have a team that people have made offers, and I think now he's saying, he wants somebody to make a $10 million deposit.
He wants to make money from it. At the end of the day, he really
That's
sees...
fine.
Look, a football club is a business. We get that, but you have to let go of it before you ruin a
the
club.
Business.
And at the end of the day, the longer he stays with them, the less money the club's going to be worth. And if he's actually a businessman, he needs some better advisors because it's not going well for him. He's probably the most hated chairman in football.
Yeah, well, does Bolton actually have a chairman right now? I don't know if they do. Bury, I don't know if they have a chairman right now.
Yeah, those are true.
Those guys would be a little ahead of him slightly.
But Bolton went into administration pretty much.
And,
and that's what, Newcastle at the end of the day, he's taking risks. He's taking financial risks. He's going to be, so unliked within the team that it's going to cause trouble.
I think Rafa
Players
Benitez
don't want to play on a team that has him. They're scared of going to Newcastle, and maybe Mickey made an error in that judgment.
Well, I think he was sold on Rafa Benitez.
And Rafa loved him.
Yes, and Rafa said, I don't want to deal with this nonsense anymore. I'm out. And he goes to China. I don't see Rafa Benitez as a guy who will enjoy working in China. I think he wants to be in a top-flight league, in a top-flight club.
Rafa's a household name. Yeah. He's a household name. It seems very an odd move to make, and he's still young in terms of his managerial career. He still has a lot going for him. And if you're running off to China, that must show how bad Mike Ashley is. Rafa was like, I'm going far away. I'm not even staying in this continent. I need to go far away.
I can't bear to watch this nonsense anymore. I think Newcastle goes down.
And then does Miggy leave?
Yeah, I think...
Miggy doesn't play in the championship.
I think Miggy's gone by January. I think he is gone in that window.
He did go to Newcastle.
Yeah, he got sold by Rafa. And I think, honestly, his representation really wanted to go. And
they wanted to sign for the Premier League, and I get that, but at the same time... There
were some comments at the time that were really interesting, and I think they got glossed over here because of all the drama being in Atlanta and wanting him to stay. I think the club might have wanted to hold on to him to find a better spot for him.
With actually his best interests at heart, rather than it being a malicious... And if anyone knows, Darren Eales knows plenty about the Premier League. He knows plenty about Mike Ashley,
He would know plenty about Mike Ashley.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, honestly, I think you're right. There was sort of some bad blood towards the end. It was sad with that. There was a lot of comments that we were trying to hang on to him for selfish reasons. But I think you might be right there.
That's what I think. They were trying to find a better spot for him. But I think he'll end up in a better spot. It's just going to be in January because I think Newcastle goes down. Who else? Palace is a club that gets mentioned as possibly going down. Sheffield United, Norwich, who we saw today. Who are the other ones you're worried about?
I have Sheffield United.
Sheffield United?
Yeah, I don't think they set the championship on fire that much, and they haven't added enough to make a difference. A lot of the times you see that unless you have something really special about you, that unpredictableness, when you come into the Premier League, you struggle if you don't strengthen. I don't think they've invested enough, and I think the Blades are going to be in trouble. They've sort of been a bit of a yo-yo team. They haven't been in the Premier League for 10 years, obviously, but prior to that, they were a bit of a yo-yo team, and I think they might struggle. Watching Norwich, I had Norwich going down earlier. They gave some fight today. We talked about the fight they gave. I think it'll be about their forward adjusting. What's the guy who scored today's name?
Puka.
Yeah, he's the championship player of the year, and I think the biggest thing when it came to Norwich was would he adapt to the Premier League as well as he did in the Championship. He showed that today with a goal against Liverpool.
It's a good goal.
It was a good goal against the second best team in the Premier League last year. If he can find his stride, if he can score goals, if they can have someone to lean on, kind of like Brighton did with Glenn Murray last year, even if it has to come to that can work for a season. Then next season you have to be concerned, and that is why I have Brighton in my bottom lot too.
Okay.
I think Brighton have struggled too much. They relied solely on Glenn Murray last year and his goals in the last minute, and I think Brighton will struggle.
I think it's the hardest thing, and when you come at this league from an American perspective and you haven't went through relegation battles and you haven't dealt with that side of it, for me, that's the trick. Is it's one thing to go up and get up. It's staying up. It's the hardest thing imaginable. Changing who you are as a club.
And keeping your fans behind you at all times.
Yeah.
Having been a fan of a team that's been promoted twice, I'll tell you, it's not easy. Particularly when you've been on such a run and you've been used to seeing your team constantly win. You've been used to seeing your team perform because you're up in the Premier League. Obviously, you've been a good side. You've scored lots of goals. It's very difficult as a fan from going to a game, supporting and celebrating 3 goals a game, and then going into the Premier League and consistently, being held to no goals or being beaten consistently badly or traveling to an away game only to lose 5-0. It becomes very hard as a fan. And obviously, a lot of fans are more thick-skinned than that. They're going to stick by the team. But It's who sticks by you in these tough times that can really change the way the club plays. Players want to play for fans that want to see them play, and you see oftentimes with teams that are struggling, hey, we want the manager out, we want the players out, booing at the end. All this stuff impacts the players' mentality, and it can be tough. And like you say again, they have to change their style of play. What worked in the Championship doesn't work in the Premier League.
It's a really interesting discussion here in Atlanta because of a manager in Frank de Boer who was tasked with doing that at a club who's a yo-yo club, Crystal Palace. And I think Crystal Palace is a club that could go down this year because they brought him in and they gave the idea of, all right, we want you to change who we are. We don't want to be yo-yo anymore. We want to be a solid mid-table team. We want to play good football. Do that. Oh, wait a minute. That's going to take time. Don't do that. Let's get out of here.
And that's patience.
Yeah.
And what's scary about the Premier League is there is no patience because all it takes is 6 games, 6 losses, and suddenly you've dropped 10 places down the league, particularly in a league that could potentially be very close in terms of the bottom half.
Right.
You can't have that patience necessarily because...
But then you don't change who you are.
Exactly. So sometimes it's such a hard thing to choose which you're going to do. Are you going to try and be patient, take a bit of a risk, or are you going to be so stubborn and play the way you play and just hope that you can get away with being that unknown club?
Yeah.
And that's what Reading did their first year.
Yeah.
First year in the Premier League. Again, I keep going back to Reading. I'm sorry if no one cares, but they stuck as a winger play club. They did well for that first year. They were 1 point off Europe. But guess what? They got figured out the next year.
Yeah.
And that's it. All it takes is time to figure people out. And with today, in 2019, with all the research that's going on, with sending different scouts to every single game, you're not going to slip under the table for very long anymore.
You've got to become something else. It's one thing just to survive, but that takes a certain skill set. And when you get there, I look at 2 clubs over the last, 15 years or so that did it for a while and stayed up, and then now we haven't seen them. Wigan, who stayed up for a long time.
Wigan Athletic.
Yeah, but I mean, they were up for a while. They did get a trophy out of it. And now, can they ever get back? Who knows? Fulham is another one. Fulham went, with a deep run in a UEFA Cup. They had some great years, and they became something a little different. But now they've lost that.
And that's the thing. Once you lose that sort of thing that separates you from other clubs, it's very hard to get back up again. You look at Sunderland. Sunderland were a team that were pretty decent, pretty consistent. But now they've had a real demise, some more heartbreak last season. And it's tough. It's really tough with how football develops and how it changes. And we even see it. It may not be to the same extent. It may not be relegation, but you mentioned it at the very start of the show. Look how that top 6 has changed over the years. Look how much of an influence money has to play.
100%. And everybody in the Premier League now has money because of the TV deals. Like you're able, if you're a bottom tier Premier League team, you're able to spend money like a top Italian club. It's crazy. It's changed the way everything works, but I want to see if more clubs look at what Tottenham did last year and gave a manager time and said, okay, we're not going to spend for whatever reason. We're building a stadium. We want to show that we have a project that can work, but they don't go out and blow a ton of money and they get to the Champions League final and they play good soccer doing it. Do other clubs look at this and say, we can develop, we can actually put money into our academy, we can go sign young players and hire a manager who's going to develop them and stay?
And I truly think academies are the way forward.
Yeah.
They have to be. It's about developing teams that have a loyalty to your club and want to stay with you. And it fits that business side of things again. Maybe they don't stay with you when they're 22, 23, but guess what? You're going to make your money back on them one day.
You should.
You should, if you're selling them, if you're doing things right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think the academy is definitely the way forwards, and it's about developing the young, investing money in. And again, we're in America, so we'll bring it up. America is starting to see that. No. I've just been asked if I want a cherry.
Oh, got to make sure.
And we got good service here at the Brewhouse.
Yeah, definitely that. I mean, let's talk about Manchester City. I thought Jurgen Klopp's comments this week were a little ridiculous about Manchester City, spending so much money and blah 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 blah.
It's Man City. We've got kind of used to it.
Well, Liverpool spent a lot of money too. Let's not forget. But I think Manchester City has also had the idea, and it's something that I've always appreciated about the club under its new ownership, is investing in the academy, investing in developing
and
players.
the women's side.
The women's side and the community. They really do more than, let's take a Chelsea, for example. When Chelsea became who Chelsea is now, it was all about spending money at the first team. Until they have to this year, they haven't really focused on their young players. They haven't played their young players. They've had great young players. They haven't played for Chelsea.
No, they've always been loaned out.
Yeah.
I know, as championship teams always got Chelsea players.
Yep.
They were the easy way. They just wanted to loan them out, and it's kind of ugly, honestly. Look at Man United. Man United never wanted a women's team. They were never interested in a women's team. Never.
Right.
Until it became popular. Once it became popular, once it became cool, they decided to buy a women's team. And guess what? They had rules bended for them. They hopped into the Women's Super League too, whereas other people wait forever.
Right.
It's interesting, and that's why I do have more respect for Man City, because like you say, from a grassroots perspective, from a community perspective, they really work to get their players involved with the communities, to be role models to an extent, go out, do outreach. That's a full-round club for me.
Yeah, and I mean, they're here, and they're bringing trophies with them, and we're going to get a chance to see all the hardware that Manchester City's acquired here recently, and we're going to get a chance in a little while to talk to Sean Wright Phillips, Manchester City legend as well. It's an interesting thing because I think Manchester City has created something sustainable, and a lot of people would argue that because, well, they have a lot of money to spend and they just go out and buy a bunch of great players. They've done that, but they've also put the things in place to be able to keep doing it. If things change, if they're not making as much money, the TV deals change, whatever. They're developing talent. It's not just relying on buying the best players in the world.
Yeah, they're finding this pattern that they can still keep implementing from the grassroots up. So guess what? If they can't go out and sign a player for 100 million, one of their players that they've scouted at 6 years old, by the time he's 18, is ready to play for the first team.
And if he's not ready to play for the first team yet, he comes to New York City and plays for NYCFC, or he goes to Melbourne and plays for Melbourne, or one of the other City Football Group clubs, and they're doing similar things in their markets. And we see NYCFC signing teenagers and playing them and giving them valuable minutes in league play.
Because it's all about getting minutes at the end of the day. It doesn't matter really where you're getting them. It's about trusting players with minutes. There's no point keeping someone, and adult minutes.
Right.
There's no point keeping someone in the academy, playing them at U18s, U21s.
Loaning them out.
Get them to a team that they're going to get some minutes on, and to trust them in the big games. Because guess what? If they're not ready at 20, 21, they might not ever be ready if you're not going to play them and trust them with that experience.
I really think that when we go back to where this started with the smaller clubs that are trying to change into something else and be a club that stays up, that's the route. It's all about developing talent. It's all about keeping the talent. And it's all about using that to change what your roster's like, rather than trying to keep doing the same thing like Crystal Palace has been doing for so long, for example. I think Crystal Palace goes down. I think Newcastle goes down. And it's either Sheffield United or Brighton for me. I'm not sure which.
Ooh. I think it'll be an interesting battle. I hope it goes down to, there's nothing more fun than the last day of the season when so much sort of rides on the line. Obviously, it's not fun for the people involved with the games, but if you're a neutral, there's nothing more exciting than skipping between 10 different games to see how the scores are going and what it means. I had both Sheffield United and Brighton in that bottom three of mine, and so if I'm going with you, I think Brighton out of Sheffield United and Brighton may be relegated lower.
Player of the season. Who do you think it's going to be? Everybody's on De Bruyne right now. Everybody is picking Kevin De Bruyne as your player of the year.
If he finds his consistency, I think he'll be fantastic. I'm going to throw out that I want Harry Kane to have a really good year. He's 26 now. He's really been, hit hard with injuries. Mm-hmm. He hasn't really found his stride. I want him to have a great season. I think what will help is he's playing with a Spurs team. One sec.
We're getting some weird feedback. All right, there we go.
He's playing with a Spurs team that's definitely performing well, and I hope he thrives. I hope he gets his goals. He's a natural poacher. So I'm going to go with Harry Kane, because if Harry Kane's playing good for Tottenham, he's playing good for England.
I think if Tottenham is going to be where we both predicted them in third, Harry Kane has to be the Golden Boot winner. I don't know if that's Player of the Year. I think Player of the Year could be a little bit different conversation. I'm kind of leaning into Raheem Sterling. I think
he was Young Player of the Year last year.
Yeah,
young.
And what progress for him under Guardiola. I think Sterling is the most important Whoa. I don't know if that was you or me. I think he's the most important player in City's team.
Yeah, I think Sterling's been fantastic. We've seen some real growth from him. Like you say, he's playing better under a manager that's trusting and encouraging him in the right ways. And what I like about Sterling, obviously, we don't talk too much about the off-the-field stuff, but I think he's an incredible role model, an incredible spokesperson and advocate for football in England and football across the world and the struggles of a young black man in England, the struggles of a young black man in the world. So Sterling, what's good about Sterling is he deals with all that tough stuff off the field, but then implements and plays on the field. Oftentimes, there's so much talk about advocates and how they talk the talk away from their sport, but they don't necessarily perform on the field. Sterling doesn't let any of that get to him. He scores the goals, he makes the comments, and I just love him as a player. And what a cool... I wonder if that's a stat, whether there's ever been a player that won the Young Player of the Year one year and then won Player of the Year the next year. But I think he could be a candidate. I don't know. He could be a candidate, and that would be a good progression. I think he was almost up for it against Virgil van Dijk last year. Yeah. And I think that's why he ended up with the Young Player of the Year award, honestly, so that they could give one to each of them because they couldn't choose.
Didn't want to be too greedy.
But
who's the newcomer to the league that you're most excited to see?
Ooh.
For me, it's Keane at Everton. It's easily Moise Keane at Everton.
Depending on how he settles. I just hope he settles.
I think he's going to be all right.
And I hope he thrives.
I had a chance to see him a decent bit last year, and when those rumors started, I thought it was a joke. I'm like, there's no way
that
Juve would let him go at this point in his development. But I think he's the one I'm most excited to see.
And he's going to change the way that Everton plays.
100%.
And I enjoyed watching Everton play last season. I had plenty of Everton players on my fantasy Premier League team, actually. And, I enjoyed having Jordan Pickford out there, plenty of quality players. So I'll enjoy that. And I think he'll be a quality player. It's just about how quickly he can adjust to the Premier League. Because like we say, Italian football, English football, they are different.
It's setting up to be an interesting season with a lot of storylines. For me, it's obviously the title race between the top two, and how long can Tottenham hang with them? Who pushes into that elite group of six, and who gets displaced? The obvious relegation battle that we always get into every year, and then the star power. I mean, for me, the Premier League has become the destination league in the world. And the money's a big part of it. The exposure is a big part of it. But the level also, I think, across the board, it is the deepest league at that level in the world.
Mm-hmm. It's the league that when kids are growing up, they dream of playing in. And that's what's exciting. I really think that people, when they want to be a professional football player, they want to play in the Premier League. That's the I've done it, I've made it. If you support a club, one day you dream that your club is going to be able to climb the league up to the Premier League. And I have to say, it really has to be, in my eyes, the best league in the world. We saw it with the European Cup competitions. Of course, the Spanish league is fantastic. Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid. But how much depth is there within that league once you drop off? And I think that's a big difference.
That's
in the Premier League, you have 20
League.
Fantastic teams, maybe 4 or 5 that are really going to struggle. But other than that, a lot of the time it's anyone's game. You really go into those games and you struggle to make predictions. In La Liga, in Bundesliga, there are so many, obvious, predictable games that it's just not quite the same.
Yeah, La Liga to me is 3 teams deep. Every once in a while you'll get a Valencia, Sevilla, Villarreal pop up, but pretty much 3 elite. Italy, I mean, it's Juventus can already lift the trophy now. Germany, Bayern Munich can already lift the trophy now. France, PSG can already lift the trophy now. What are we excited about? Let's go one step beyond that. So we've talked Champions League, but you're always hearing the talk about a European Super League or something along those lines. Do you think we ever see a massive difference in the way club football plays out in Europe?
I hope not. I see what you're saying. You're saying that Barcelona now joins the a league, and then the best 4 in Premier League.
There's been reports. There's been
Isn't that
documents
what Champions
circulated.
League's for?
Well, I think it's somewhere in between, and I think if it's ever going to happen, it's not going to replace the domestic leagues. I don't think there's any way it can truly replace the domestic leagues, but is it more than just the Champions League? Is it more than 6 games?
My thing is, I think that benefits the other clubs more than it benefits the English-based clubs.
Oh,
because what
100%
you're trying
it
to do there is you're trying to give teams like Barcelona, teams like PSG more competition. Maybe those leagues and their advocates might say, yeah, we want this. But I think from a Premier League standpoint, they wouldn't really be interested in it. I think you're right. It can't be a league. It's not going to ever replace the Premier League. Premier League's not disappearing. La Liga's not disappearing. What might happen, like you say, is it's a more extended Champions League. Maybe there's longer group stages,
groups
more
of 5,
games.
groups of 6, something like that.
Do you really want to add more games to these seasons? We've seen the issue with overflow games. We watch it firsthand with MLS.
Right.
When teams are playing in Open Cup, when they're playing in CCL, when they're playing in MLS, when their schedules are so stacked, and then you add the travel component in. We don't really have that issue in Europe right now. You hop on a plane, you maybe fly an hour at max. Suddenly add all that traveling in, the different time zones, and you start causing a lot of problems that you don't really need. In America, you don't have an option. You have a country with so many time zones, such a vast side that unless you're playing in your state, you're going to have to travel far anyway.
Right.
Why cause more trouble in a league, and if it's not broken, so say? Well, maybe those leagues that don't have as much competition need to find a way to even the playing field. And I'm not going to suggest you any suggestions on how to do that.
I don't know.
Maybe that's what they need to look at more. How do you make these leagues more closely contended?
That's the balance, because I think what's happened in England is the opposite from the other leagues in Europe, where you've had the TV money come in. You've had that evolution happen, and it hasn't in one way, because Manchester City and Liverpool feel like a cut above. We'll deal with that in a second. It feels like maybe they've taken just a little bit of a step, but there's also 6 teams, maybe 7 or 8 or 9, as everybody else has thrown out different possibilities. Mm-hmm. You don't have that in any other league in Europe. They're trying to find it because they don't share money in the same way. The TV money is not spread the same way. So your Real Madrids, your Barcelonas, your Atleticos,
getting far more money.
They're way up here. And you've got teams in La Liga who are in like a Bolton situation.
Because people don't want to watch them play.
Right.
And that's the thing. There's no money in it. And it's a concerning thing. You see people turning out for Premier League games no matter when it is. People want to switch on the game, whether it's Norwich versus Brighton or Man City versus Chelsea. And obviously there's some fluctuation, but people still watch those lower league games. People are still interested. And you have to wonder why that's not necessarily the case in other countries, whether the quality product they're producing isn't the same, whether there's such a huge drop-off, or whether the fan bases are so concentrated on these certain big clubs and there isn't that sort of small fan feel.
Yeah, you have a little bit more of like a national club feel with a Real Madrid and a Barcelona kind of splitting Spain in half. Bayern Munich and Juventus kind of feel like national
countrywide
clubs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, PSG with the money they've spent and that feel too, just because France you could do that. It's fascinating to me what happens next, because I think we will see changes, because you've got those clubs who are going to push hard, and I think it's down to the English clubs to figure out, okay, long term, what do we want? What do we want to be, and how are we going to evolve with the times? Because it is getting more expensive to be a top club. It is difficult to match what Manchester City, what Liverpool are doing. And clubs have to be careful about spending themselves into oblivion. We've seen it happen.
And buying the wrong players. It can be really appealing if there's player A on sale that scored 22 goals in Bundesliga. Mm-hmm. But guess what? If he doesn't fit into your style of play, you've just dropped 100 mil on a player that isn't going to be effective in your system. So honestly, the biggest pressure in terms of a football club has to be on the scouters. Those people that are putting in the reports to the manager about players they should look at, that's a really hard job.
Those are difficult because it's always hard to project a 14, 15-year-old player, and are they going to become Raheem Sterling? Are they going to become Harry Kane? You never know. And then the people who make the decision, and the final decision, is you take all that input, and do you then go bring this player in? Do you bring in a Moise Kean? Do you go make the signing that's going to be, half of your transfer budget? Are you going to drop that on one player?
It's a risk reward game. It's a game of gambling, honestly.
It is.
You win some, you lose some, and that's what's tough. And I think the key word for all these teams is patience. Are they going to have patience, or are they not? And that's the difference between a team potentially putting themselves in a place to finish third in Spurs, and we'll see how Man United do and whether they really have patience, because Man United's going through some huge changes.
Yeah, and they need to. I mean, it had to happen because for me, as somebody who followed them in the Beckham and Giggs and Scholes days, because that was the first club we had. That was the first club we saw on a regular basis, was that group. They're not that anymore. They lost that a long time ago, and it probably left when Sir Alex Ferguson left.
Yeah, Fergie. Just who would want to follow Fergie? You know, Sir Alex Ferguson.
David Moyes sure didn't.
Yeah, he's just the most incredible football manager of all time. You know, he's the most famous as far as I'm concerned. Growing up in England, he was a real fantastic manager, and he was kind of responsible for those success days. And of course, he had the best players in front of him, but he had a role in that. And Man United's definitely not the days of Sir Alex Ferguson. There's no David Beckham anymore. They're still a worldwide club. They'll always have that fan base. But let's see what happens, because I really think they're going to struggle. They've lost a lot of players. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, like we say, is a legend. But one of the biggest things in the world is always understanding that the best football players in the world do not always make the best football managers in the world.
Right.
And there's so many other things that you go in as a manager, you can't just say 100 words at halftime and it make everything okay. You could be saying the best speech. Two managers could say the same speech to do different sets of players, and they have completely different reactions. So he's got a real tough job this season. And as I said earlier on, if I was to put any juice boxes onto the first manager out the door, I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer might be at risk of his job one day.
Ooh. It's possible. It's very possible. You said something that I want to follow up on. You said Sir Alex Ferguson is one of the greatest managers, and definitely in Premier League history. I'd say he is the greatest manager of the Premier League era. If Pep Guardiola wins the title this year, wins the league title again, is he in that running?
Yeah, I think he's been fantastic. I think he's been a game changer with Man City. And like you said earlier, when you discussed how they came about him, they wanted him, they saw him, they needed him. And look, Man City has quality players. They could go out and perform week in, week out without a manager, I'm sure. But whatever he's saying is the difference between them going out and performing in one way or going out performing in a consistently good way, and having the right attitude on and off the field. And whatever he's doing with that mentality of the Man City players is fantastic.
I think Pep has completely transformed football management. I really do. I think the holistic way he looks at it, and you
his dress sense.
Well, he's gotten a little more casual over the years, though. I mean, he started out, it was to the nines when he was at Barca. I think that his time in Germany maybe chilled him out a bit, got a little more casual, and now, I mean, he's wearing cargo pants.
I couldn't believe it when I watched
cargo
that on TV.
pants.
Cargo pants and a white T-shirt.
I mean, Pep, come on, man. But as a manager, I really think he has changed the game, and I don't think it's something that you can do everything that he's done. I don't think you can just look at that pathway and replicate it and have the same success. I think a lot of it is definitely him.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, Pep haters, would want to say that he just has a quality squad to work with, that anyone could go into that job and do a decent job.
How many managers have been in spots like that and didn't do what he did?
There's people there's
a whole long list.
Absolutely. So I think that's what makes him special, that he obviously had the blessing of money, had the blessing of a squad that has fantastic potential, but that potential needs to be rubbed in the right way. It needs to be, educated. It needs to be coached in a style that's going to perform week in, week out, and they're going to win the Premier League.
I think so. And I kind of have the feeling they're going to get over the hump in the Champions League as well. I mean, it's so much luck, and it's so much of the draw, and you might have to pick and choose points and things at times in the season to rest a guy, but they've been so good for so long. It feels like they have to get over that hump and do both.
Yeah, I think they need the double in terms of that. They need more, because they have so much expectation on their shoulders. Everyone's expecting them to win the Premier League pretty much.
Right.
Everyone's probably expecting them to make a run in both domestic cups. They need something big, the cherry on the top, the cake icing, because otherwise it's been an underachievement or an underwhelming season. And that's what's tough when you become a team like Man City, when you become a club with such high expectations, even when you perform, even when you achieve something that's impressive, it should always be impressive that you win the Premier League. But it's not going to be anymore because they've been so good for so many years now that people just want more. And I'm sure the Man City fans later will express those views.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like he needs to get past where he was at Bayern, where at Bayern he won the league, he won the cup, and couldn't get over that in Champions League. And he made some mistakes in Champions League too, and he'd tell you the same thing. I don't think this past time around, I don't know if he made any mistakes. I mean, it's just, it happens sometimes. You lose a game that you get outplayed or you have bad luck or whatever. I don't think he made any massive tactical mistakes.
No, I think it was just a really good game. It was a good advert for football, obviously. I'm trying to remember.
Insane. It was completely insane.
Early goals. And, you know, it's a tough one. And as a manager, you're always going to overthink. You're always going to wonder what you could have done differently. But I think he has a clean slate there, and it was just a good game of football between two very good teams. Yep. But you sure as hell know he's not going to be wanting to get to that final and losing again. And it'll be a make-up year for him in his mind.
100%. Let's try to switch mics and see if that gets rid of the feedback.
Maybe I just have bad
All right,
technique.
we're going to give this a go, and we're going to see how this works. Okay, maybe this is a little bit better. All right. We're going to get into talking to a few of the different Manchester City supporters, groups, leaders who are here in Atlanta to celebrate, one, a bunch of trophies being in the house, and two, the start of the Premier League season. They're not going to be here all night because they play really early in the morning.
I think they're probably still going to be here all night.
I think they might be here for a while, but I think they are going to try to get a little bit of sleep. We're also going to be talking to Sean Wright Phillips here in a little bit.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. Sean was on 92.9 The Game with Dukes and Bell earlier this afternoon. Very cool to hear Mike Bell and Carl Dukes, two of the best sports talkers in the business, and nationwide they're recognized as such. One, have Sean Wright Phillips on and have a great conversation. And Sean has a really unique perspective that I'm looking forward to picking his brain about a few things because he played in Major League Soccer, and he played for the New York Red Bulls. And his brother, has scored a few goals in Major League Soccer, just a few.
He's been a decent asset to them, hasn't he?
A decent asset. And
I think his dad's a legend.
Also very, very true. And I think Sean has a unique perspective on two different clubs in Chelsea and Manchester City who kind of went through similar things in becoming mega clubs and becoming big clubs and how hard that is and what that's like. And I think he's seen in Major League Soccer a league that's trying to become a big league in that way.
Exactly, and he's got a fascinating perspective of an Englishman, playing in MLS. And we've seen more English players move over, do the switch to American soccer, and it's interesting to see because he did it before it was fashionable.
He did it, I think, right before or right after Wayne Rooney's brother did it. John Rooney played for the Red Bulls at one point.
So you hit me. Sometimes you just blow my mind. What kind of stat is that? Wayne Rooney has a brother?
Yes, John Rooney played in MLS. He did. I'm not making it up.
Before Wayne?
Before Wayne, yes.
Does he look like Wayne?
He doesn't play like Wayne, I can tell you that much. He definitely does not play anything remotely like Wayne. What did you think about Wayne Rooney and the move back to Derby?
Mind blown, honestly.
I didn't expect it.
I mean, he's been an asset at DC United. I wonder how many kids are crying because their jersey has Wayne Rooney on the back, honestly. I think the printers are going to have to try and do some jobs removing some names. But he was incredible at DC. They relied on him heavily. And from that perspective, I'm surprised DC did such a good deed in letting him go on that sort of free. They didn't have to. Wayne Rooney's worth a lot of money. And
2 more years on his contract. And I think there was like a 5-year image rights deal after that. DC gave up a lot of money to let him go back home. And
I honestly have some respect for that. I think that's an incredible thing as a club because with Acosta potentially wanting to leave and, Wayne Rooney out the door now, it's going to hit DC United hard. But they've done a good service in letting a man go that doesn't want to be there potentially. I wonder how much of a managerial role he's going to have and how much of a player role he's going to have. I do think that the Championship is a completely different league to MLS. I think he's going to have to adapt in another level. I know a lot of Americans won't want to hear this, but when I go home and watch championship football, I do think it's extremely different. It's extremely... I just don't think Wayne Rooney's going to set the championship on fire as much as he'll set MLS on fire.
I agree. It's more... we talk about MLS and the physicality in MLS, but it's different in the championship. I think in MLS, the pace of the game does slow down at times, and some of it's due to playing in the summer, and it's hot. You have to play at a slower pace, and in the travel, and all the things factor in, so it changes the game a little bit. But he's going to struggle, I think, at where he is in his age to have that same impact on the field.
Yeah, and it's a weird one because you almost think he would have gone to MLS once he was done with that.
Yeah.
To make that move over to America, then move back, I think maybe he realized he was playing some really good... He might have even been impressed by himself with how well he's still playing, with how his physicality is. Some of the recovery runs he made for DC United, I don't remember him making when he was 5-6 years younger. So maybe he realized, you know what, I'm not done yet, and that's why he wants to make the move back. I wonder, like I said, what managerial role he's going to play. I think he's got a soccer IQ of a genius. He's been described by a lot of DC United players as a natural leader. It'll be interesting to see how that sort of transforms into a coaching role. But it's a great way to get some coaching experience. This is not disrespectful for Wayne, but I think Wayne needs to stay involved with football. I don't think he's going to have another career. So coaching may be on his repertoire. I think football is kind of what he knows best. So this is some great experience for him to get that coaching on his CV, on his resume, while still playing the game he loves. But I'm less scared of Wayne Rooney as a Reading fan when they face Derby than I am of Wayne Rooney at DC United if they face Atlanta United.
And that's fair, and I don't think that's a knock on the level of Major League Soccer. It's grown dramatically over the years. It's still growing.
I love it. I absolutely...
Yeah, it's a different kind of league. It has a different feel. I mean, we talk about in the Premier League how anybody can win on a given day. Take that, multiply it by 20, and it's Major League Soccer because you get just crazy results from game to game. We do have an update on Alisson Becker of Liverpool. He will miss the UEFA Super Cup clash against Chelsea. They're doing tests on his calf. He will undergo a scan to determine the extent of the issue in the coming days, but he has definitely been ruled out of the trip to Istanbul for the Super Cup.
That's a big loss.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a pull. Maybe it's nothing more.
But you know what? In some ways, I think it's good because there's not another Premier League game next. It will be nice for backup keeper to get some minutes and get 100%. Used to him. And who knows, that rest is better than rushing and coming back. And like you say, it could just be a pull. But you wonder, getting injured on a goal kick isn't the normal way to get injured.
We have the Liverpool fans chanting behind us. Maybe they got the news. Maybe they feel a little bit better about things. Super Cup with Chelsea for Liverpool. Liverpool should take that, right?
Yeah, you would think so. That should be another trophy for their cabinet.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about that one for the Reds. Mauricio Pochettino said today and on the eve of their opener that they have to win a trophy for the season to be a success.
I would completely agree.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, there's so many trophies to be entered for. You have a chance. You have to think that maybe one of the other big teams neglects the League Cup.
If they win the Carabao Cup, is that a success?
No one cares about the Carabao Cup.
That's what I thought.
No, that's like a Mickey Mouse Cup.
So that's the Gummy Bear Cup. That's not going to happen. So.
But I think they'll still take it. You know what I mean?
Would they? See, that's what I wonder.
I think the fans won't be. It's not the best thing, but I think the fans would still like some silverware. If they make a run. If they get into the semi-finals, for instance, if they get knocked out, they're not going to be okay with that. So it's one of those, but they need to focus their attention elsewhere, and an FA Cup is far more valuable than any Carabao Cup.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think if they win the FA Cup and they finish third in the league and they get to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, that's a success. That's
a good season. That's a good season.
I think so. If they win the League Cup instead of the FA Cup,
then
I don't
they need
think
to
it's
go
a
further in the Champions League. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100% with you. All right, we're going to get some of the Manchester City supporters group leadership up here and talk a little bit about their experience. Thanks to everybody who has come out and joined us here at the Brewhouse Cafe, and thanks to everybody who's listening on our Soccer Down Here app and on soccerdownhere.net and on Spreaker. If you guys have not heard, every Monday from 7 to 9 p.m., we will be doing soccer over there live from the Brewhouse every Monday night. We'll have a rotating cast of folks talking not just Premier League. We'll talk some championship. We'll talk Serie A. We'll talk about all the craziness going on in the Copa Libertadores in South America. All kinds of talk with all of the folks in the SDH universe and lots of different supporters group, input as well. We want this to be a show, and it's the thing about the game that I love is all the different opinions.
It's a game of dividing opinions.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something that's added some more divisiveness, VAR.
Yes, VAR. I was having this conversation today as well, and I cannot wait for the first crazy VAR decision in the Premier League this season to watch everything light itself on fire.
It's going to be absolutely nuts because the Premier League is analyzed in a completely different way to any other sport around the world. When you watch a bad VAR decision go wrong, I can't wait to watch the pundits on Match of the Day try and break that down and explain how or why it's wrong. And
who throws something first trying to break down a VAR decision? Gary Neville or Lineker?
Ooh, Neville.
I think Neville, too.
I think Lineker has to be a little bit calmer.
Neville gets bleeped, I think, definitely,
absolutely.
talking VAR.
It's going to be horrendous, and I'm disappointed it's entering the game. I understand why. We've had this conversation plenty of times.
Oh, yes.
There's part of VAR that I would welcome.
Yeah.
There's the rights and wrongs, the offside decisions, but when it comes to decisions that are still debatable, when it comes to decisions that they're still going to look at and be like, the VAR got it wrong, that's not okay. Give us facts. We want facts.
Yeah, I want it to not be used to re-referee games. I want VAR to be an assistance to the referees. Because, look, I think being a referee at a top-flight match is the hardest refereeing, umpiring, judging thing in sports. Because you have to run 10 to 15 miles a game.
That's it. People underestimate how fit these referees are. They're fitter than any player on that pitch because they have to make the runs of every single one of them.
And they have to keep their head during all of it. They can't be out of gas, can't be tired, because then they have to deal with everybody yelling at them.
I refereed some youth games. That was the scariest experience of my life. I would never, ever want to be a referee. I don't care how much it pays. You could not pay me enough money to ever referee a game.
Look, I'd be a VAR if I'm in a remote location.
If I can watch it 72 times and hide away, that's fine. But if I'm on that pitch in the middle of a field with people yelling at me,
nope.
I couldn't do it.
I refereed intramural soccer at the University of Georgia one season, and the last game I refereed was the women's final where...
Women are the scariest.
One woman did a perfect, belly-to-belly suplex of an opponent. I mean, I thought it was either Scott Steiner or The Rock who pulled it off, and I had to give her a red card, and I thought she was going to toss me. I'm like, no, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore.
You don't pay me enough, UGA.
No, I'm making $25 a game. No, I'm done. I'm out. I'm going to get hurt doing this. Craziness. It's the hardest job. So I completely am on board with the idea of video assistant referees. And I think the Premier League is going to do it right. And I think they've learned what has worked. I think they will. I mean, I think Serie A does it really well. I think the Bundesliga does it really well. I think MLS needs to look at those leagues and take some of it because they don't do it well.
No.
It needs to change. The Women's World Cup, the group stage was a mess, but the final stages were great.
They learned, and that was the important thing.
Same at the World Cup in 2018. I think they learned. They got down to the nitty-gritty of it. They took a step back, and I hope the Premier League starts from that step back. Only get in offside. It's yes, it's no, do it right, done. Judgment calls only if the referee didn't see something. If the referee makes a judgment, let it stand unless he's screened, unless there's just something he didn't see.
Yeah, if he doesn't have the view of it, then we call it.
Right.
But if he saw it, just let his decision stand because at the end of the day, he's the one that's going to have to go look at it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So how many games do we get into before we have one? Tomorrow, what?
It's happening this weekend, 100%.
We didn't have it today. I don't think there was even a check. I didn't notice any finger to the ear or any check motion. It was a pretty easy game. Tomorrow morning, probably the same for Manchester City, but you never know. in that next round of games, something stupid's going to happen.
There has to be. You don't have
Something
10 games
stupid.
without there being any controversy.
Yeah, you're going to get nonsense because it's got to be tested, and I want to see what the reaction is. It's a needed element. I just hope they do it right. I really do.
I didn't know what that guy someone just said something to me.
I don't know if they agree with VAR or not out here. Yeah, VAR, yes? No VAR. Saqib, you got to come up here. We got to talk to you. First, we got to talk to you anyway because you are the major domo of the Brewhouse Cafe, Saqib Zafrani. And he has strong opinions about VAR, I can tell. All right, first off, it's very cool that things are different. Not in a bad way. Things are different. It feels like a new day for the Brewhouse, and you're a huge part of that. Tell everybody why and why you got involved.
Well, I've been a patron of the Brewhouse for about 10 years, and I knew Michael and Denise, the previous owners, very well. They're like family to me. And really, this is just them passing the torch, and we're just taking it in the direction it was already going. I keep their console all the time because I'm brand new to this type of business. We're learning everything as we go, but we love the Brewhouse, and we're going to do everything we can to honor its history, its memory, and the loyal supporters that always come here. And, we're going to be doing cool stuff like this with you and get a lot more involved in the soccer community in Atlanta.
All right, so you got very riled up about video assistant referees. I need to hear your thoughts.
I understand that it's a losing argument to be anti-VAR. But there's a certain romantic nature to the sport that is completely taken away with VAR. With VAR, imagine if VAR had been around for 50 years. We don't have the hand of God. We don't have, the Zidane headbutt. All these kind of things are different.
I think you still have
history.
the headbutt.
We probably would have still had the headbutt. VAR wouldn't have made Materazzi a nice guy all of a sudden.
I actually think that the Zidane headbutt could have been the first instance of VAR being used because nobody saw that live. The fourth official saw it on the video board in the stadium.
Touche. And then, in Atlanta United, when VAR started in MLS, Atlanta United it seemed like one or two VAR instances in every game, and it was driving everyone nuts. Mm-hmm. And you and I have talked about this. By and large, they get the calls right. When you're watching the game, nobody knows what's going on.
And I think one of the hardest things is every time you want to celebrate a goal, you can't really do it. I'm holding my breath in the stands until the game physically kicks off. And that impacts the viewer, the supporters' experience so much.
Oh, absolutely. It just sucks the emotion out of the room, out of the stadium, out of the bar, out of the pub. You've just seen a brilliant goal, and then they go and look at VAR, and 20 passes ago it was offsides. And we've seen that pretty much exact scenario play out sometimes. And I understand that it is right, but I think there has to be a balance between getting it right and honoring what is the beautiful game. Some things just happen in the course of the game. It takes out a human element. Like I said, I know this is a losing argument, but I think we were fine before VAR. I really do. There was a couple of instances every year where people would get really, really riled up.
But the thing is, these decisions are worth millions of pounds. That's the thing. When there's decisions that are made that cost a team promotion or they lead to relegation, that's tough. But I'm an anti-VAR too. I'm disappointed with the way it's changing the game. But I do want to ask you, if there were a couple of decisions you would keep, for instance, I'm sure you like goal technology. Do you think goal line technology is a good thing? Goal line technology.
I think goal line technology is different than VAR. I'm not anti-technology. Goal line technology is an instant read. It literally instantly the referee has a wristwatch or something, and it buzzes and it tells them goal or no goal. And I haven't seen an instance with goal line tech where it's gotten it wrong. So,
if you could do that with offside, for instance, would you take the offside being a buzzer or a button that the person up on the fourth line could put a line and give a pretty instant review rather than giving the decision to the on-field referee? If the fourth official, the VAR official, could make a decision, say that was offside, it's a fact, sort of Hawkeye like in cricket, would you be cool with that?
Offside is a tricky one because when you have offsides, you also have to consider the times where it's called offside when it wasn't offside. So for example, it's level and it's very close, or sometimes the linesman just gets it wrong. They're human. And they call off a brilliant move as offsides when it wasn't, and we can see in the million replays that it wasn't. How do you account for that scenario then? Because when it is rightly offsides, you're ruling it away, but you're also not fixing when it's not offsides. There's still that human element.
Well, you have the pain now with the linesmen second-guessing themselves, holding their flag down, allowing the play to continue.
The Women's World Cup. We saw this a million times, and it was, VAR, it wasn't the brightest day for VAR at the Women's World Cup.
It did get better as the tournament went on. And I think something for me that I've talked about, and I want to get both of your opinions on it as leaders of the anti-VAR movement. I need to pick your brains. So if you went to what the NBA and the NFL use now, where it is a separate location, centralized location, they've got all the feeds coming in, and it's not sending it back for an on-field review. It is saying, no, that's a foul, that's a penalty, that's the call, and you go with it. Would that make it better or worse for you?
I think it's smoother because one of the worst things about VAR is the waiting. When you have stoppage times of 8, 9, 10 minutes, it's ridiculous. However, I think when you do that, you completely undermine the center referee, and that limits the respect. We expect our players to respect the referees. We want them to believe that the referee knows what they're doing. But if 3, 4, 5 times a game, a decision is not being made by the center referee in the field, how can you expect to respect the referee?
Well, I couldn't agree more about the referee being undermined. It's an ideal situation, having it kind of like the NFL review room. And that would be wonderful, but it's 2019 and nobody is a fan or supporter of just one league. You can watch Bundesliga on Fox and the Prem on NBC and all the MLS games and all the streaming services. There's no scenario in which every one of these leagues and tournaments adopt the same system. I mean, we had VAR in the World Cup, VAR in AFCON, but no VAR in the Gold Cup.
Right.
So these type of things, it's not uniform across the board. And, you're watching multiple matches a day being officiated differently. It's very confusing for viewers and supporters.
Yeah, different leagues have different personalities. Like different leagues have different lines on physicality, for example, and where they're going to call something, especially where they're going to throw cards. You watch an Argentine league match versus a Mexican match, it's very different. You watch that versus a Premier League match from a referee perspective, completely different worlds.
Absolutely. I mean, even among referees in the Premier League, you have some refs that let them play more physical and some refs that'll blow a whistle at, a gust of wind. But at the end of the day, before VAR, it was always the ref. That's it. The ref's call is what it's going to be, and that's it. Now in this post-VAR world that we live in, you have no clue what is going on when VAR comes up. And I think if they figure out a better way to implement it, I'd be more happy.
Yeah, that's critical. And I can tell you from a broadcasting perspective, and look, MLS radio, we're not getting what national TV broadcasters are getting, but I can tell you as a broadcaster, we're not getting anything. Like, we're having to figure it out on our own because we're not getting any information from the VAR or the assistant VAR. We're taking guesses and trying to figure it out on the fly and trying to explain to our listeners. But then at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, you have 45 or 70,000 people who don't know why a goal was just allowed or not allowed. And for VAR to work, and I'm with you, it's not going away. Like, you're not putting the genie back in the bottle. But for it to really work, the communication is the number one thing that has to change. It has to be obvious what is called, why it is called, and if that means miking a ref up, or miking up the fourth official and he says it or something. There has to be an explanation to the audience.
Well, I will concede that it's gotten better since the first instances of VAR that we, I think Atlanta United was the first MLS game to use VAR, or where it actually popped up. It's gotten a lot better from then until now, as far as communication and speed and all that sort of stuff. And I think MLS is really the perfect league to kind of pioneer all these ideas we're talking about.
All right, Zakib, we're going to move on to some Manchester City folks here in just a second, but let everybody know what you've got coming up. You're wearing the Liverpool scarf, so, they're already looking at you a little funny. All right, let everybody know what's coming up here at the Brewhouse Cafe this weekend, because it's pretty nuts over here.
Well, yes, I am a Liverpool supporter. I make no bones about it. But tonight, we're getting ready to kick off with a huge party for Manchester City.
How much did that hurt you to be present at these big city events? This is incredible. Does it hurt you a little bit to be celebrating with them?
Do you know what? If it were Manchester United, it would hurt me a little bit more. I don't hate Manchester City.
Okay, I'm sure they're happy to hear that.
It's really an amazing experience. Manchester City, the club, have made this possible. We've got an amazing head of the supporters group here, and Chris Green, and his efforts have made this possible. We've had supporters coming in from all around the Southeast, Tennessee, Florida, the Carolinas, and so on. Tomorrow morning, we're going to have the actual Premier League trophies, the FA Cup trophy, the Community Shield, and another trophy, the Carabao Cup.
And they've got all the women's trophies too.
And the women's trophies.
Don't forget those. Those are really important.
Well, okay, since I have this opportunity, they're not going to let me talk now because I'm wearing this Liverpool scarf. One very interesting thing, the Women's Premier League in England has announced that they're going to be broadcasting and airing all of the games for free, every single one. And the Brewhouse is really going to take that on, and we're going to be airing every single women's game here.
So you don't know how much that excites. That's so incredible. And I think what's so exciting is you're going to have an amazing audience for them. I'm a member of lots of the different supporters groups, and they're already saying how they are determined to come out and back their female team as much as their male team. So thank you for giving a platform to the female game, because it's what's needed. It's really what's needed. The style of play, everyone I'm sure here watched games in the Women's World Cup. The style of play is exciting. The standard is fantastic. England is making so much progress in the women's game, and it should be a wake-up call to the American teams that they need to step it up. So thank you for giving the female game a platform.
Well, it's a no-brainer. The Women's Premier League is a very competitive league. The last title went down to the final day, I believe, and Manchester City pulled it off.
Women's Super League is what it's
That's
called
all you
officially.
guys do is win titles. We're going to be doing all of that. One thing I want to say, we couldn't do any of this without the support of the soccer community in Atlanta. If you ask me, I would call Atlanta Soccer Town USA. We have an amazing community, passionate supporters, tons of expats from all over the world, from every league and every team. We had Norwich supporters in here today. I can't wait to see some of the Sheffield United supporters come through when they play. So I just want to say thank you to everyone coming out, and let me get rid of this mic and stop getting booed up here.
Very, very cool. I'm totally with you on Atlanta being Soccer City, USA. I used to say on our broadcasts that Orlando had this thing that Orlando said that they were the soccer capital of the South. No, they did. On one of their broadcasts, they said it. And when we were in Orlando, I made sure to say that really loudly the first time we won down there.
So that everyone could hear you.
Yeah, and we got kicked out of the stadium at the end of the night. But, just saying. Atlanta's the soccer capital of the United States. There's no question about it. And it's not just Atlanta United support. It's the support for events like this. It's the support for organizations like Soccer in the Streets. It's the women's game. It's the men's game. It's the youth game. It's all of it. But tonight, we're going to talk about Manchester City coming to town to see what the soccer capital of the United States is like. And let's talk about the Manchester City supporters group here in Atlanta. Chris joins us right now.
Hey, Jason, how you doing, mate?
Good, man. What's up?
We're excited.
Let's start with the question that Jess and I kicked things off with. Back in the day, it used to be a Big Four. It was just a Big Four in the league. And Manchester City wasn't part of that at that point. It's become a Big Six, but has it really now become a Big Two and a next four?
For years, City were not even an option to talk about top four. We embraced the fact that we got the oil money, fair enough. Sheikh Mansour took the team, but he's invested so cleverly into the team. He's built us now to be in the best club in England and one of the top teams in Europe, hands down. I think it's fair to say there's a top two right now between Liverpool and City. Liverpool are definitely, over the last few years, they've invested wisely. They brought in good players. They brought back good players like Salah, who was with Chelsea for a while, never got even a look in with Chelsea, and now look at him with Liverpool, banging in goals for fun. Teams like United, who had a good 20-year run of dominating English football, are finding themselves on the back burner. Their owners aren't putting money into the club. They're taking money out. The players aren't happy. The organization's not happy. The fans aren't happy. And so there's a cancer within the club, and they're just slowly falling down the table. And if they get sixth, they're lucky. And that's just the way it is. And then teams like Tottenham are also starting to make headways. I think Arsenal are going to have a little bit of a resurgence. I see that coming. Arsenal have invested very well, so they're going to be a bit of a challenge for that maybe fourth spot at best. I think City and Liverpool is going to be a battle between the two of them once again.
So what is Man City doing so much differently than the other clubs?
It's the investment more than anything else. We've invested so much into the club and the youth team, and having this phenomenal academy that we've got now. We're able to bring in young talent, bring them through the ranks. We got Phil Foden, who, he's not an everyday starter, but he's a game changer. He's coming on and he's making a difference in the match, whereas City never used to have that. And so we're able to invest into the team. We're able to invest into the stadium. And then by doing that, now City are a global brand. We were just the noisy neighbours. We were the little club from Manchester, working men's club, with only a handful of fans, and now we are Manchester.
So why did you pick City?
I'm a fourth generation Blue. My entire family are from like Withington, Stockport.
We like those ones.
Yeah, but we get made a lot of fun of because we got a lot of new blood. All right, so we got the post-oil money fans. But the thing is, when you're a winning team, you're going to get a lot of new supporters. Manchester United in the 80s couldn't sell out their stadium, and then when they started investing money and they went on to win a lot of awards, especially when they won the treble, all of a sudden they had a massive global fan base. So it happened. It's just the nature of the game. I don't think City are necessarily doing anything different. We're just the best team in Europe right now, and that just shows. Besides, I know Liverpool won the Champions League. All right, I get that. But we won, the domestic quadruple, really, if you want to call it that, and we're just killing it, which means young fans are going to want to support the champions.
So you set up my next question. The Champions League feels like the Holy Grail in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
What do you want more this season? I mean, is a Premier League title okay, or does it have to be Champions League?
Champions League.
Why?
I'm 100% convinced this is Pep's last year.
Really?
Yeah, this is his extension year. So he's under a one-year contract. I think he wants international after this. He's won everything you could possibly win domestically in all the leagues he's been in. He wants to manage Spain. That's his dream. And I think City this year, we've done the back-to-back. To go a three-peat in the Premier League is just so out there of the ordinary. City aren't going to focus on that. It would be nice if we won it. We'll embrace it. We'll have a blast. But Champions League, am I right? Champions League this year is what City are going to go for.
So if you have a repeat of last season, it's a title race, you win the title, Champions League run, is that a failure?
Say that again. If we don't
win
the Champions League?
Is it a failure if you repeat exactly what happened last season?
It's not a failure. It just means Guardiola will be leaving City without that Champions League.
Right.
And for a club that's putting a lot of money into the club to win the Champions League, as a club, that would be considered a failure.
So how does it make you feel when Pep openly states that the Premier League is his priority and not the Champions League? Do you believe him?
He's the master of mind games. Pep Guardiola will never admit in a heartbeat that the Premier League is not a priority.
I don't know what's causing it. All right, so here's another question. We had a debate earlier about Player of the Year. I'm in the Raheem Sterling camp. I think he can make that step up and be the Premier League Player of the Year. Settle down over here. Settle down, Liverpool. Kevin De Bruyne has been the one that everybody is talking about. Who do you think is let's just say, the City Player of the Year?
I think if Kevin De Bruyne stays healthy, he will be the Player of the Year. Don't forget, last season we played most of the season without Kevin. Sure. He was injured, and we still went on to do what we did. And Raheem Sterling, Bernardo Silva, they really took it upon themselves as a youngster to carry the team, to be honest. That pressure's going to be off them a little bit now. Kevin De Bruyne is back. He's looked phenomenal during preseason. I mean, he hasn't skipped a beat. And I think if he stays healthy, he's Man City's Player of the Year. He's just going to be phenomenal this year.
So one thing you mentioned earlier that has struck me about Manchester City and their rise is they've invested smartly. It's not just investing and throwing money around. I mean, the women's team, the academy, all of the community work that the club does all over the world. You know, how important is that to you guys as supporters at this level across the pond? How does that affect how you feel about the club?
Well, I love the fact that City aren't focusing just in Manchester anymore. They're focusing globally. I think we've got 11 teams now under the City group, and we're buying more. We've got teams in Japan, Australia. We got New York City Football Club, which are coming here tomorrow or Sunday to play Atlanta United. So they're creating that global brand. By creating that global brand, you're expanding the fan base, which makes the supporters extremely happy because we're able to reach out to other places that we've never had before. Like we've just opened up a branch in Orlando, and we've got the Orlando people coming here to Atlanta to come party with us. I love that. Maybe 10 years ago, that wouldn't even been a thought. That wasn't even a thought, mate.
How many different Manchester City supporters groups are there in the U.S.?
I think we're over 48, if I'm not mistaken. Wow. It's around 48. We've got 18 coming to this event tonight and tomorrow. 18 branches.
So you're obviously the leader of the Georgia-based supporters group. What sort of responsibilities does that include for people that are wondering what it takes to lead a group of rowdy supporters and organize and make sure they feel just as involved with Man City as they would if they were actually in Manchester itself?
So as the chairman of the ATL Citizens, it's my job to set up the watch parties. So every time City play, we come out to the Brewhouse, we set up our banners. We embrace the fans that come through. As members of the group, Man City opened the door to having discount on tickets. If they want to go home, watch City play, they have unbelievable deals that you just don't get in England. City are very engaging with the supporter branches here in the US, especially now we have a headquarters in New York. It makes it so much easier. So we're constantly doing raffles, giveaways, promotional stuff. We're doing fundraisers all the time for Soccer in the Street. We're doing fundraisers for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And it keeps the supporters engaged, it keeps them passionate, and it makes them feel a part of Man City. Because City are giving back what we're giving to them too. And
I think that's amazing. It shows that Man City truly value the fans no matter where they are geographically. It would be so easy for them to focus on just those ones that are buying tickets, that are season ticket holders, that are, spending money in Manchester. But for them to do that outreach is brilliant. You've got a whole weekend of outreach. If anyone's listening right now, how can they get involved with Man City this weekend in particular?
So this weekend, obviously, we're doing the branch party tonight. We've got 18 branches coming out tonight where Man City will be here. Sean Wright-Phillips is going to stop by. Former City legend, Chelsea player, played for the Red Bulls, so he's very popular here in the States. Tomorrow we got the big watch party in the morning. It's going to be an early start, 7:30 in the morning. But we'll be here. We've got the West Ham group. They're going to be out here too. They'll be rowdy, blowing their bubbles, having a good laugh. And if you wanted to become a member of any branch, you can just go to mancity.com/supportersclub. And all the supporter clubs are listed, and you can sign up that way and reach out to the different branches. And then we have our own website, which is mancityatlcitizens.com.
I got to ask you before we finish up, what has been your favorite moment as a Manchester City fan?
Well, I've got two. So my first favorite is 1999, Paul Dickoff scoring the tying goal against Gillingham.
Wow.
We were 2-1 down in the playoffs, and if we hadn't have scored that goal, that was it for us. We weren't getting promoted. And that game, when we actually ended up winning in penalties, kind of springboarded Man City to where we are now. So without that win, we're not where we are now. But the 2012 Aguero goal against QPR is just absolutely iconic. You will never see anything like that in the Premier League ever again. For it to come down to literally the last kick of the match to win the league over our bitter rivals, Man United, who were celebrating that they'd won the league, and then they found out that City had just scored in like the 93rd minute. It was epic.
That's one of those moments that, I mean, I think that's why you support any club, to have
Absolutely.
a moment like that. It's just something that you never forget. I mean, Atlanta United's young. We don't really have a lot of those moments just yet.
Yet.
I think they're coming. I've got to ask you, since maybe there's a little bit of conflicted feelings. You're in Atlanta. You have New York City coming to town, who is, part of the City Football Group.
Yep.
What's Sunday like?
So when New York City was founded, I embraced it because we hadn't had a team. Even
Two-year head start,
at that point. But once Atlanta was announced they were having an MLS team, Arthur Blank was going to be the owner, and I'm like, okay. I had to embrace it because I'm a ATL citizen. So I embraced the fact that Atlanta United had an MLS team. I bought season tickets. I got into it. When New York City come to town, I'm kind of on the board about it. But at the same time, either way, if whoever wins, I'm kind of happy.
No, you have to pick a side. You can't sit on the fence. Who do you want to win this weekend?
Atlanta United.
There we go. That's the answer we all wanted.
You got to support the home team.
You can want them to do well when you're not playing against them, but when you're playing against them, you have to support Atlanta United, surely.
Absolutely. I mean, you embrace what's in the city. And the fact they won the MLS trophy last year just rose Atlanta soccer to a whole nother level. So it's hard for me to hate that. So I'm happy for them. I want them to win. I want them to win every trophy they can. There's always a part of me that loves New York City, but good luck to Atlanta United tomorrow. I hope they win.
So what do you think of New York City's field?
It's atrocious.
That's
an embarrassment to the MLS.
I'm glad you think that. You can at least dislike one thing about the team.
That is absolute embarrassment. The fact that we have all that money and City won't buy them a stadium. No, thank you.
All right, Chris, I'm going to ask you to grab us another guest. We want to get a little bit more of the outside of Atlanta, another Southern representative who is here to talk about their experiences with a Manchester City supporters group.
Absolutely. We got plenty here, so I'll start grabbing them for you, mate.
Grab one for us. We'll talk to them. Jess and I will handle things for a little bit. Okay. I want to follow up on something Chris said. Could this be Pep Guardiola's last season at Manchester City? If so, how do they handle that? Who would be next?
That's a huge loss.
Is it Mikel Arteta?
Oh, I don't know. That's such a huge loss, but you wonder with Mikel Arteta whether he's been gaining that experience to take over the reins in the future. Maybe Pep's been honest about his expectations. Maybe I feel like he's always had City's best interest at heart. I don't think he would drop them without giving them some sort of notion that potentially it was something that he was interested in.
Agree.
I think he would give them enough warning to prepare, and maybe he has. Maybe he's given them that warning that, you know what, I really feel like I've conquered everything. Like Chris says, if he wins the Champions League, he's pretty much conquered all there is. And what's up next? Well, of course he wants to manage an international team, and a team like Spain, incredible. Of course that would be a natural inclination for him. But I think he would have the respect for City. He's so well-liked. He's so respected by the City fans. I don't think he would do them dirty and just leave off the cuff. So maybe that's where Arteta is. But is he the man to follow? We mentioned Alex Ferguson, Sir Alex Ferguson,
right.
I should say. No one wants to follow Pep, do they?
No. I mean, nobody wanted to at Barca or at Bayern Munich. It'd be the same at City. The thing that's always struck me about what could happen with Pep Guardiola is I don't think he chose the City football group completely by accident. I mean, obviously they recruited him pretty heavily, but the connection in New York, and I think there's something you have to remember about Pep. when he took his sabbatical year from Barcelona before he went to Bayern, he spent that year in New York. I think he maintains a residence in New York City. I would not be shocked at all if at some point Pep Guardiola manages New York City. Not at Yankee Stadium on that awful field.
There's no way he would agree to managing a soccer team playing on a baseball field.
No, not happening.
Did you see it last night?
Yes.
The way that field lifted up as someone struck the ball, and there was like a whole sheet of turf, like physical turf that moved.
The divot was larger than a table in here. I mean, it was that bad. It was dangerous. Hopefully they get it sorted out. I hope they do, because I think in general they've been a good addition to the league outside of their awful place to play. Let's talk more Manchester City supporters, and we have guests in town. And we have guests from all over. I believe 14 different places in the U.S., in the South, are here in Atlanta to celebrate the start of the season. And we have a special guest right now. Please introduce yourself to the crowd.
Shalina from Alabama.
Alabama.
Where in Alabama?
Birmingham.
How did you become a Manchester City fan?
My boyfriend, I started dating him in 2005, and we went to England, and I grew up playing football, soccer, whatever, and I don't know how to explain it, but like a room full of like 500 rabid men, and I'm like the only one there.
I've been there.
At some point, they start licking your face and screaming at City songs, and it's like...
I haven't had my face licked, I'll say that. That's a new experience.
This was a long time ago. This was the fun City days, you know? It was like, you just lost every damn week. Oh, I mean, every week. You know, so, yeah. So I became a fan, then I guess that was 2006. So that was my first game. So, yeah.
And once you'd seen one game, you were hooked. There was no swaying you. You were definitely City till you die from that moment.
I mean, literally, without a doubt, the best fans on earth. Like, completely. I mean, you just have to understand, like, City was such crap then.
Trust me, I know.
Like, complete crap. And, like, there was nothing to do except for to support your team. Like, you know.
And so that was what kind of drew you, the fact that they were supporting, whether they were being beaten by Reading, because that happened.
The fans 100% made me a City fan. Absolutely the fans. I love the fans. The people I met that weekend are still my lifelong best friends. I love them. I go see them 2-3 times a year. I love them. The fans are the best in the world.
Favorite player in the team this year?
Oh, God. This year? Oh, I don't know. I like I mean, you know, like, I like Aguero because he's, like, perfect. But, like, you know.
As a player or as a human being?
All of the above. I mean, he's like a god. You know what I mean? I don't know. I have nostalgia for like the old players that played with like all heart and never did any. Stevie Ireland, you know, like people like Stevie Ireland.
That's a good one.
I got to see Joey Barton show his butt at a game once.
Joey Barton is the most terrifying human being. Like, Joey Barton is terrifying.
Yeah. I find him hilarious. But, you know.
You're a City fan. It's easy.
I remember I watched Joe Hart play when he was a youth and everything like that. So, I mean, I don't know. Company was like a god. I don't know.
So here's a question. How did it change when obviously the money came in, you were bought out, and suddenly you pretty much had an unlimited budget? How was that transition from being used to, I think you described them as being crap, to being the best team in Europe, pretty much?
My husband and I travel a lot. So it used to be that everywhere we would go, and I have family in the UK, but it used to be everywhere we'd go, my husband would wear kits or whatever, and they would be like,
why?
A City fan? Why? Why? Like, that's the question we got all the time. Why? You know, and now we never get that question. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. So, I mean, winning is so strange. I feel like City fans still don't know exactly what to do with winning. It's kind of like, we did again. Oh my God! Like, it's still like, are you sure? You know?
She's clearly learned the Mancunian accent right here, right?
Much better than I could do. Okay, final question for you. And I think it's probably the question of the season when it comes to Manchester City. If you had to choose the Premier League title or the Champions League trophy, which one do you have to have?
Premier League.
Hey, see, I like that answer.
It really feels like it's split. And the more and more that I've talked to people, it feels like there's different camps that feel different ways about it.
It's the best football in the world. I mean, it's, you know.
And it's the consistency, right? It's winning week in, week out over the course of an entire season that matters.
And you have to play in the weather in England. I feel like you should be awarded something more than just a trophy. The fact that, especially folks like Aguero that had perfect weather their whole life and they survive in Manchester, they deserve a crown.
Maybe he can just get a new jacket, like a coat sponsor.
A new Lamborghini, you know.
He might get a crown by the time his time at Manchester City ends.
A statue.
Yeah, definitely that. All right, let's get some other perspectives. Thank you very, very much. Yes.
All right. Introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from?
I'm Lynn Terrell. I'm from Sale, Cheshire in England, not far from Manchester.
And where are you based now?
Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Chattanooga. How did you end up in Chattanooga, Tennessee?
School, a man.
Fair enough.
And that's how I ended up staying. But I've been a City fan since 1954, when my brother told me he was a United fan, so I had to be different.
See, that's a good sibling rivalry. Very good sibling rivalry.
Yes, that definitely is the sibling rivalry to end all sibling rivalries.
Yeah, and it's been lifelong. I've been through thick and thin. I've been Colin Bell, Franny Lee, Mike Summerby, Harry Dowd, Mike Doyle.
I love it.
The lot.
What's it like for you then now with the new world that Manchester City lives in?
It's a little bit rarefied air. You're kind of wondering when the penny's going to drop sometimes. But they remind me when the Sheikh took over of somebody winning the lottery and they went a little bit silly with money. And now they've got a really good management team. They're financially prudent. And they just got their stuff together.
Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people miss out on. And the comments, and that's why I was really bothered by the comments this week from Jurgen Klopp about, well, they can just go buy players. I think at the beginning they did in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
and they didn't have the plan to back it up. Now they have that plan to sustain just going out and buying great players.
Right. And yes, they were. They were a bit stupid. They'd buy like 6 players and, you know, and that was fine. But then they realized they got sensible. They got a really great management team in, something United doesn't have.
Not right now, they don't.
No, they got Ed Woodward, and he only understands pounds and cents. He doesn't understand talent.
It's a mess.
So, as a female football fan, how's your experience been as a female supporting Man City?
Well, I used to be on the Kippack Street in Main Road. And I can remember in some of the crowds, I'd moved down like 10 yards, and my feet wouldn't touch the ground. A bit scary, but it was fabulous being on the Kippacks. The Etihad is wonderful. It doesn't quite have the same atmosphere as being on the Kippacks, you know, with all the standing, but a lot safer.
So when are you next going back to watch a game?
Sorry?
When will you next be going back to watch a game?
Well, I was going to go for the Tottenham game, but some other things I'm planning on the trip had to get pushed back, so it'll be in a few weeks.
Are you starting to see more Manchester City fans in Chattanooga?
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is, you know, it's taken years and years for all these Liverpool and United and Arsenal and stuff fans. So City's really catching up now. And we're getting them young. And I spread the word when even my Lyft driver, her son is going to watch the game tomorrow morning.
That is real good marketing. Impressive, impressive marketing there.
Tired of the marketing in England where it's all pro-Liverpool this and they only lost by 1 point. But they're still the first loser. So
sympathy. They're getting a second place, but isn't second place the first loser?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I'm an EPL person. If you can manage the 38 games instead of looking out on 7, that's...
Thank you. It's all about the consistency, right? It's all about winning games consistently.
Like the lady from Birmingham said, you go through all that muck and bullets of Manchester rain, I've lived Manchester rain, so I know. I used to take 2 buses to go to Main Road, and many a time I've come home in the rain. So I understand. And if you could do that, and you've got these players like Sergio, who's amazing, got beautiful eyes, and amazing. Colin Bell was always my guy, because he was Bury, which was where I was born. And, he came from the northeast, but he captained Bury at 19. And then he came to City for £60,000.
Which was a lot back then, I'm sure.
It was. Not much, but a lot. Probably many millions now. But, City knows their price. Who would want Harry Maguire for 80 million?
Yeah, that was an odd one. Harry Maguire was an odd one, so...
I'm not even going to get into it.
Too slow, apparently. So Jason asked Chris, you've had plenty of years supporting Man City. If you had to pick one moment to relive again, one moment to ever relive again and be a part of for one last time, what would that moment be? What was the best experience as a Man City fan ever?
Toss-up. Either...
I said one.
Well, it's a toss-up, sorry.
No, it's okay.
City winning 4-3 at Newcastle to win the league in 1968.
Ooh, I like it.
Or Sergio with the eyes.
Sergio's eyes.
Everybody loves Sergio Aguero.
No, I've loved him from day one against Swansea when he nearly went into the goalpost to score a goal.
Nice.
Just amazing.
Who's going to be the most important player for City this season?
Kevin De Bruyne.
De Bruyne?
I think so. I worry a little bit about David Silva as captain because he's very quiet, but I think he'll grow into it. He won't be the same as Vinny.
Right.
Vinny's the Rock.
Absolute legend, yeah.
But good luck to him in Belgium.
So Chris brought up a really interesting point that he believed that Pep might leave after this season. Do you agree? Do you think Pep's gone this season? And if so, if Pep leaves next season, who would you want to see as the next City manager?
It's going to be so tough to follow.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, if City win the EPL and the Champions League, he'll leave.
I think so.
He's contracted for a 5th year, but I think he'll leave.
Yeah.
Because he was tired after this one.
He said every time that he's been in this situation that 3 years was the magic amount of time for him. And I think the fact that he stayed longer shows, his respect for the club. I think his love for the club. I think, a lot of other people would have stuck to their guns, but he really wants to bring the Champions League, I believe.
Plus he loves the management staff there, Tixi,
yes.
And who were all at Barca. So
yep.
It's like home.
Do you have any concerns that when he does leave, that there'd be a drop-off?
No, because they'll find somebody. I think probably Arteta's in line.
Yeah, I really think he's definitely in the mix.
Or the guy who took over at NYFC.
Dome Tarrant.
Yeah, because he had a tough time to begin with, but he's brought it around.
I have a lot of respect for Dome. I think obviously you're Pep Guardiola's right-hand man for as long as he was. You know what you're doing tactically, and you know what you're doing in running a club. I think both would be possibilities, and I would probably imagine that if Pep goes out the way he wants with trophies, that he would have a say in who would come after him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's tired. He'll take another sabbatical somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe somewhere in Italy to learn Italian.
I could see that. He spent a little bit of time playing in Italy. I think Pep will take a break, and then he'll be recharged and want to conquer something else. And maybe it's international football. Maybe it's Spain.
Yeah, he wanted to do Spain or Argentina.
Pep in Argentina would be the most amazing thing ever. I watched the Argentine League a decent bit because we get so many players from Atlanta United and NMLS who come from Argentina, and it's a whole different animal. I think Pep would love it. It is raw and intense, unpredictable craziness.
Yeah, and the thing is, I love Messi, but I think they've catered to him too much, and all they do is pass to Messi.
Right.
And that's too easy to defend.
It's something that I think he's had to learn in other spots at Bayern and at Manchester City, that you don't come across a Messi every day. And Messi was the problem solver at Barca. When things fell apart, it's get the ball to Messi and he's going to fix it for you. You're not going to find that at every club, and he's found other ways to be successful, and especially with the roster he has at City.
Yeah, and he's got such a squad. And I'm really excited about Rodri.
Yes.
He didn't show it in the Community Shield, but he's got to learn. He's got to learn how to play Pep's way.
Yeah. It takes a second, and I think it's something that long term, now you've got the depth, you're going to be fighting on multiple fronts, you want to win every trophy you can this year, you're going to need all that depth, and he's got some time to ease into the squad.
Yeah, and I'd love Mendy to stay healthy.
Yeah, that's always the concern. I think they've had enough depth to deal with it, but we've seen it here in Atlanta this season with Atlanta United. If you get a run of injuries at the same position, you can be as deep as you want, but one position gets weakened, and then you're struggling.
Yeah.
There's just nothing you can do. Thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Oh, look who that is.
That's almost perfect timing. We're going to hear in just a little bit from Sean Wright Phillips, Manchester City legend. He's been making the rounds in Atlanta today. For everybody who has not heard the whole weekend, first off, the season starts at 7:30 tomorrow morning. It's an early wake-up call. Go ahead and make sure you set your alarms now. Afterwards, there's a big event at Station Soccer in the West End where Manchester City is coming out to support an organization that's close to both of us in Soccer in the Streets.
Absolutely. Soccer in the Streets, for anyone that doesn't know, is an organization that's kind of trying to right the wrongs that's going on in American soccer for kids. Anyone that doesn't know, soccer is really expensive in America, really, really expensive. And any kid that wants to play, if they're not from the right social demographic, the right financial demographic, is struggling to get the opportunity to do so. So that's where Soccer in the Street steps in. Jason and I have both worked there. And what they're doing is fantastic stuff. They're providing free soccer training as well as leadership classes to help these kids thrive through the beautiful game and get a chance to enjoy it, because it's not fair that one group just wouldn't get to play.
Yeah, and the Station Soccer project, if you haven't heard about that, it's something that it's transformative. It really hasn't happened anywhere else in the world, where you're seeing soccer pitches built at public transit stations. So it takes the transportation element out of it for so many of the kids who can't literally can't afford to get around to different clubs.
Their parents are so stressed and feel so guilty because they don't have a chance to drive them there. They either don't have a vehicle, or if they have a vehicle, they're using it for work, so they're feeling like they're letting their kid down. Instead, they're creating soccer pitches right inside the community. The West End is right by the neighborhood, so the kids can literally walk to practice. And it's an amazing thing. We've seen 200 kids sign up to Station Soccer at the West End in its first season. So that's 200 kids that wouldn't usually get to play being able to fall in love with soccer.
It's unbelievable when you look at it, because in that community there had never been a soccer league. There had never been an opportunity for kids to play. If kids in that neighborhood turned on NBC Sports Network or turned on NBC and saw a game, if they saw Manchester City and they said, I want to play, there's nowhere for them to play. And if somehow they found out where they could go play, they might not be able to get there, or they might not be able to afford it. This takes all of that out of it, and it makes it a game for everybody.
And Man City's already doing incredible things with Soccer in the Streets. Just yesterday, they surprised one of the groups of kids that have a real dear position in my heart, the Clarkston community.
Right.
Now, Clarkston is literally the most diverse place in America. We have kids from all over the world that have loved soccer their entire lives, but arrived in America and didn't have a chance to play the game still, apart from soccer in the streets. Yesterday, they got to meet Sean Wright-Phillips. They got to take pictures with the Premier League trophy, with the Community Shield, with the FA Cup. Now that's game-changing. And for Man City to choose Clarkston, a place that not many people have heard of. If you ask anyone in England, where's Clarkston, they don't have a clue. But Man City made the effort to research that and decided to change these kids' lives. And trust me, these kids are posting these pictures everywhere. For them to see this, for them to get the opportunity to talk to Sean Wright-Phillips, it was a game-changer for them.
Yeah, it's an inspiration, and you never know what meeting Sean and seeing a trophy like that up close can do for what these kids want to be. And you're talking about Clarkston, where it is the largest refugee resettlement area in the Southeast and sometimes in the United States. And it's kids who love the game and don't have a chance to play.
But are incredible players. That's the thing.
Players.
When you go out and watch these kids, you could be at any club in the whole of Georgia. These kids could walk into any club. They just don't have the resources to play there. So when you watch those kids play, when you see what the game does to their lives, the outlet it provides, for the younger kids, the child care support it provides for the parents, it's such an incredible thing. And like you say, these kids have the potential, but maybe it took a conversation with Sean Wright-Phillips. It took a chance to see the trophy to just give that little bit more of a push to end up like two of our kids that are actually starting their preseason today for their college career. They both are ending up playing college soccer.
It's the game can change people's lives, and I think a lot of people who are here today are meeting folks from all over the Southeast and meeting fellow Manchester City fans, people that they would have never met without the game that all of us obviously love and spend our lives being around in some form or fashion. The thing that's always impressed me the most about Manchester City, and Chris talked about the investment and investing smartly, and us coming from a nonprofit background, obviously we get what an investment like that can be. But Manchester City hasn't invested just for photo ops, just for PR moves, which you see so often because it's the easy thing to do. They've built pitches in New York. They've built pitches in Manchester. They have taken the game to kids who wouldn't have that chance to play. And it's not just the easy way to give back. They've really dug into the dirt and built things from scratch.
No, absolutely. It's very easy for them to bring a player for photo opportunities. It's very different for them to have their players go out and give coaching sessions in the community, like I've seen, or to go have conversations, or to actually take the time of their day to go find out what these kids need, why, like be true role models, and it's an incredible thing.
We've got Manchester City, Orlando in the house. Now, I don't know. Yeah, come around here. Now, we won't talk about Atlanta United and Orlando City, just in case there's any issues here. We'll stay away from that completely. Okay, we'll stay with Manchester City. First off, please introduce yourself to everybody.
Hello there. My name is Tristan Gomez. I'm one of the founding members for Orlando Citizens. We just had one of our most recent supporter group meetups. It actually went really, really well for the Community Shield, considering it was really, really early. And, yeah, I'm really happy to be here. It was a bit of a drive, but really psyched to be here. I love it.
It's a long drive, yeah. That'll take some out of you. How did you become a Manchester City fan?
Well, it started a long time ago. Personally, I'm from Argentina, and my father really loved Carlos Tevez and Pablo Zabaleta.
Okay.
So he would always have the TV on and watch them play. And I just would sit next to him and just watch the games unfold, And with that being said, I just started following Man City since then and never looked back, really.
How many people do you guys have in the Orlando group?
Right now, we're at 22 members officially. For our first official year, pretty good. Like, I'm really excited. I feel like when we get the bigger games later in the season, like the Champions League games or the derbies or the games against Liverpool, I think we're going to get really, really good turnouts. We picked a spot in Orlando where is where a lot of tourists come to, and Orlando gets a lot of European tourists, more specifically people from England. So I really feel like we can get really good crowds for really big games.
So if you met just a random person that came into one of your watch parties and they weren't sure, they were just torn about who they should support, why would you tell them that they should pick Man City to support from now on?
That's a great question. I would tell them that Manchester City is a very, at least in my opinion, it's somewhat biased, but in my opinion, I believe that Manchester City is a very wholesome club. We come from a lot of like really good roots. The argument that a lot of the other top 6 teams, well, top 5 excluding us, that like to make is that we don't have a great history. We actually have a phenomenal history. If you just research and you just open up a textbook and you look at the history, you'll read some amazing stuff. Like Manchester City was Manchester City essentially before Manchester United was Manchester United. Like we shared games of them like back in the day during like the World Wars, and they couldn't use Old Trafford. So it's just history like that. It's very like great roots, and like a lot of people like to throw shade at the fact that we were, bought by, have a great influence of ownership. But that's just how football is nowadays. You know what I mean? I feel like people tend to forget that. A lot of teams spend a lot of money. We spend a lot of money too, but we've been really good about our business this window. But back to the point, I would say that, in terms of following Manchester City, is that we're a very wholesome club. We come from really great roots, and if you were to just, give us a chance, like, it's a really good club to support. I'm always open to people supporting whatever club they want, out of their own volition, because people find themselves in clubs they support. I found myself in Manchester City,
Yep.
I went to a school where a lot of people would follow Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham, etc. And no one really backed Manchester City. And when we were on the up and up, I was like, we're like kind of like an underdog, in a sense, because we don't have the history that the likes of, Arsenal or Man United have, winning so many trophies, Who doesn't love a good underdog story? You know what I mean? Like, people tend to forget that, but, like, we were in like, the thick of it, There was a time where Joey Barton was, like, our best player. You know what I mean? Like, and, like, we praised the likes of Giorgio Samaras for the longest time, And I still think he's a legend, you know what I mean? But people be like, oh, Man City doesn't have legends, Yeah. I just feel like, to sum it up, there's a lot of backstory that comes to Man City, and it's just great to, look on it and just praise it.
What's the scene like in Orlando when it comes to the Premier League and international clubs? Like here in Atlanta, the Brewhouse has been here since 1998, and you get everybody who comes to the Brewhouse to watch games. And in different clubs have different bars and pubs around town, and you get a little bit of separation. Is Manchester City one of the best supported clubs in Orlando?
Unfortunately, right now, I would say it's a tug-of-war between Liverpool and Manchester United.
Okay.
In Orlando.
That's
right
typical.
Now.
I mean,
right
those
now.
are two clubs that have had a longer run in the U.S.
Liverpool have their watch parties in a really great pub located right in the heart of downtown Orlando.
Okay.
That's where me and Alex and Maya, they came with me as well. Hi, they're from Orlando. We go to Harp and Selt a lot, and we would watch a lot of the games there. And we started to realize that, the likes of Liverpool and Man United, they have these great supporter groups. So we figured out a way to make our own group to start watching games. And it just really worked out for us in the end.
I've got to ask. So we've asked everyone up here so far, would you pick the Premier League or Champions League, and why?
That's another great question. To keep it short, 20 words or less, I would absolutely love a Champions League. No one can argue against that, Never won in our history. It'd be great to just chalk it on the board. But if you were to tell me that right now, spoiler alert, that we're going to win the Premier League again, I would take that. The Premier League, in my opinion, is arguably the better test over a long season.
Yeah.
38 games, and one of the best leagues of the world. It's a very tough league to win. And to give credit to Liverpool, I don't like giving them credit, but you have to give them credit. They pushed us.
Yeah.
97 points to not win the league. That's insane. The fact that we finished, and that happened again. That game in January was a title decider. All the pundits came out and dubbed it, this is a title decider. This is a title decider. People say that to build hype for the game, but it really was a title decider. We won the league with games like that. We had a 1-point advantage. The Premier League is the best league in the world. I don't see any arguments against it.
I think some have tried to position it as if you win the Premier League and don't win the Champions League, that it is a failure of some sort. And I've heard that more and more, and it just baffles me because I have that reaction to it. I think, obviously, I get it. You'd love to have the Champions League because it's something you haven't had, but I'm with you. It feels like a little bit of a competition of luck in a lot of ways.
I would feel that Manchester City, in our years in the Champions League, we've been... any City fan will tell you that we've been somewhat unfortunate. Even from our first season, we were this close to qualifying for the knockout rounds, only to lose to Napoli, who had the same points as us, but they had the better head-to-head because they beat Villarreal. You know what I mean? So, we even have very unfortunate moments. And, people, the fact that people I use Twitter a lot. People will tell me on Twitter, oh, City have never been to the semifinals. Hello, we made there against Real Madrid and only lost 1-0. We've been close. We've had our chances, and we're going to keep competing year in, year out. With the team that we have now and the fact that we're extending contracts, we have young players, we're going to be competing every single year. We will be there, so people won't see the last of us. It is inevitable that I think. Kind of like Thanos, I am inevitable. That's Man City with the Champions League. That's how I like to see it, at least.
It kind of feels that way. Your favorite addition to the club this year?
My favorite addition... I would say, obviously, Rodri. He offers a lot to us. People like to compare him to Fernandinho, but I would say he's not Fernandinho in the sense that he loves to get forward and play more box-to-box. He's more of like a Busquets. He likes to play deep, work with the center halves. He's 100,000,000% a Pep Guardiola player. Pep Guardiola likes the Busquets himself. And had a great play start at Barcelona from what was it? I think 2010 to 2014, something along those lines. And I really think that he's a true Pep Guardiola signing. He's really going to just work out for us. I thought in the few games that he's played in Asia and the Community Shield, I thought he had the game on lock for the most part.
I don't mean to rush you off, but we do have someone who's kind of a big deal that we're going to get a chance to talk to in just a second. Thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate
absolutely.
it.
Thank you for having us.
Shout
out Orlando Citizens. Shout out Orlando. OCSC. Till death do us part.
Thank you so much. And I promise I won't say anything about Orlando. I promise. All right, let's get the Manchester City legend up here. Sean Wright Phillips is going to join us right now. Sean's been making the rounds all over Atlanta, doing all of the media circuit today. Thanks for taking out some time for us. We appreciate it. Let's start with this. So we're going into this season, and we've been talking about it all night, about what this upcoming year looks like, and has Manchester City and Liverpool turned what used to be a top 4 and then kind of became a top 6 now into a top 2? Have they pulled away from everyone?
Last year obviously showed that performance and capable, the way they play, the way they've kind of separated themselves from the pack, but I think this year is going to be a bit harder.
It's kind of an interesting dichotomy, and you haven't gone through it with your time at Chelsea and at City, seeing the league evolve and get stronger. Is it a more competitive league now in your mind?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. Obviously, the style of football has changed. It's more of a passing game. It's not so much players dribbling all over the place. It's a very concentrated, tactical game, and obviously Pep and Klopp has shown that and taken the Premier League to another level.
I want to ask you a little bit about your role with Manchester City now and what you do with the club as an ambassador.
Well, it's pretty cool, to be fair. I go into places where obviously we're representing Atlanta over here for this branch for the opening game. So we was at a grassroots thing on Thursday, which was pretty awesome to see, because for me it's the way I started, and to see it happening in America shows how big the sport's getting over here. So as well as building a fan base bigger globally, we're seeing other things as well and helping out in other areas.
So what makes Manchester City so special as a club?
It's just one big family, which includes all the fans. Like, we are just one family, and we're going for the ride, and we're enjoying the ride all together.
So obviously you played for Man City in a sort of different time period to how things are now. How has that change been from observing as an outsider now that there's so much money involved in the club?
For me, I've been back quite a lot, and I've been around the club. But as a club, I don't think it's changed much. but as a drive and an ambition and the rate it's grown at, it's changed a lot. And obviously the fact that it's changed is seen in the collection of trophies that we've had over the last few years.
One thing that's come up a couple times talking to the different supporters group members is it's obvious that the investment has changed things, and that's fine, but it's been smart investment. And I think some of the things that you've touched on, it's not just investment in top-flight players. It is in the grassroots. It is in the long-term development. And that's going to transform the club over the whole period of time, not just in the short term.
Yeah, you can see from the time, obviously, the owners came in that it was a long project, and that's somewhat getting towards, I wouldn't say the end, but as for the direction, they're in the right place, and it's just moving forward, growing, and the caliber of players are just getting better and better.
Something we talk about a lot. Jessica and I both worked with Soccer in the Streets, an organization that you're visiting all weekend, and you were over in Clarkston yesterday to meet the kids there. Development and making the game accessible for all, and I know that's something that Manchester City has really put so much time into, and money and facilities and coaching and all of it. In England, over your time playing and being involved in the game, how have you seen that change where it is more accessible for your average kid?
Well, in the UK, it's completely different to the States. So it's like you guys would just carry a basketball and there'll be a court, whereas for us in the UK, we'll just carry a football. We'll play on concrete, grass, wherever we could kick the ball. That's how we grew up. So for us, grassroots has always been there. But I think for America, it's a bit different. And I feel now that's starting to build a foundation where younger kids can start playing and learning at a younger age.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, growing up in England myself, it was more like a jumper as goalpost kind of thing. Here, it's a monetized system. Yeah. What steps does the US need to make? And do you think it's such a substantial problem here that it's impacting the development of players, and that might be why the US struggles on an international stage?
First of all, they need to make space available for the kids to play. They need to be able to walk out the house and play football or play whatever sport they choose, really. But yeah, I definitely agree with the fact it has an impact on the national team, because there's too many gaps in areas which are important learning stages. Like you go from preschool, then you miss a couple of years, then the rules are different in college to what they are in prep school. So it's so confusing as a kid. Like, whereas in the game of football, as soccer as you call it, there's just one rule all the way through, and it should just be the same no matter what age group you are.
So let's get into this upcoming season a little bit. We've talked about, teams that we can see challenging like Liverpool, but looking at teams that might be able to take that step up into a European spot, who could be a surprise in your mind that could push the top 2-3?
I think it would be hard for anyone to push those two so early on. I think in a year or two maybe, but I think the surprise package for me will be Chelsea, because everybody's underestimating them. Like I've always said, you don't keep 41 players on loan that ain't good enough. If they're not good enough, you just sell them. But the fact that they brought all the key members back, I feel like they could trouble a few teams.
So you mentioned Chelsea and Frank Lampard now in charge there. Have you ever thought about going into management?
No, I'm way too laid back for that. That's too much stress.
No part of it? You don't want to crack the whip at training?
I like my hair.
Okay, let's talk about the other end of the table a little bit now. So this is always something that... Well, hey, somebody might have to follow Pep. I mean, that's been an ongoing topic as well. You going to throw your hat into the ring there? You want to throw your hat into the ring and follow with Pep Guardiola?
No. He's way up there compared to...
Nobody wants that. How impressive is he in your mind? You said he's way up there. I mean, is he one of the all-time greats?
I think for me, he is the greatest for me. Like, obviously, people ain't going to like when I say, but you got to give respect to Alex Ferguson. But I feel like Pep's completely different. Like, he's brought the game to a whole new level, and the only person that seems to keep up with him in the Premier League at the minute is Klopp.
So you're speaking about Pep. Pep has been very open about the fact he is prioritizing the Premier League. Do you think that's true? Would you prefer a Champions League win or a Premier League win? Which one do you think is more important for Manchester City this year?
Right, for me, I feel like if he is prioritizing, I think it's the right thing to do, because it's a long old season, and you need to have your players' mindset to win that Premier League again, and I just feel like everything else comes with it.
How hard is it in the midst of a campaign to balance the two?
It's very hard, but I feel like with the depth and the quality that Man City have on and off the pitch, I feel like they have enough to do it.
You look at the moves coming into the season for Manchester City. Who's kind of grabbed your attention as a player that you really expect to impact the squad in a big way?
Bernardo Silva. Because obviously when he first came, it was tough for him to get involved. But as soon as he got his chance, he's grabbed it with both hands and basically just not giving it up.
Who's going to be the player of the year this year for the Premier League?
I don't know.
Come on, you got to give me one.
I hope it's Con. I hope it's Aguero. I feel like he deserves it.
And top goal scorer.
Yeah, Con's got that for sure.
Good answers, good answers.
How competitive do you think it's going to be? Is it going to be like last year? Is it going to go down to the wire?
Well, Liverpool started it off already. We're already behind them, so now we're chasing them again. So it's going to be a battle of the two, it looks, at the minute.
Does Tottenham push those top two at all?
No, not for me.
Not at all?
Way.
Okay. Are we going to see seasons like we've seen the last two from City where, I mean, you're talking about two of the greatest seasons in not just Premier League history, but English First Division history. Is that sustainable? I mean, can you stay at that high of a level?
I think, yeah, they can. I just feel like it's going to be harder because everybody's going to be expecting them. So everybody's going to just sit back, basically. So it's going to be just breaking teams down again. But I think they can do it, yeah.
Okay, I want to throw things back a little bit. What is your favorite memory in a Manchester City jersey?
Scoring my first goal at Millwall.
Wow, okay. Yeah, that's not an easy place to score. I'm sure you heard a few things.
Well, the supporters weren't there because they were banned.
Oh, well, there you go.
And that was like my first ever goal. So, yeah.
It might be for the best. There you go. How special of a year do you think this can be for Manchester City? Do you feel like it's the quadruple kind of season?
Yeah, but just in general for Man City, even with the women doing so well, it's an important season for both of them, and I think they're going to go ahead and top it again.
I definitely want to get into that with you. It's something Jess and I did a daily podcast during the Women's World Cup, and I talked to Andy May from BT Sport this week about how that is impacting the women's game as a whole in the UK. For Manchester City, how important is it to the club?
It's very important. Like, they're built on winning bases, and the fact that it's not only the men's team that's doing it, and the women's team are doing it as well. So if they can keep that going, it's only good for the club and obviously the fans.
And what is the involvement in terms of the men and the women's team? Do they interact, or is it kept pretty separate?
I can't actually answer that because Pep don't like to let people watch training. So
it's quite a private thing.
That sounds about right. So we've had the conversation all night, and this is not something you can really predict, but a lot of people have said with Champions League, with Premier League, and if Pep gets that Champions League for City, that maybe that would be what he signs off with. How hard is it going to be to follow what Pep Guardiola's done?
I don't think he's going to sign off.
You don't?
I feel like he's happy there. Like, he seems happy. He's got, supposedly in a way, partly the best team. Liverpool are up there, but other than that, I feel like he's in a happy place, so why would you sign off?
Yeah, that's been the thing, is a lot of people have felt that way, and generally he has. Generally it's been 3 years, it might be 4 years, and then he decides to move on, but the difference at City, from what I can see from the outside, is that he's surrounded by friends in a lot of ways. It feels like a family, and maybe he didn't get that at Bayern Munich, for example.
That's the way Man City has always been since I was 16. It's just been like a big family, and that hasn't changed, and I don't think it ever will change.
Well, there's a lot of family members who are here who want to meet you, so we're going to let you go and meet some of your family members out here. But, Sean, thank you so much for taking the time for us.
Nice one, thank you.
Sean Wright-Phillips, everybody. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. Thank you. I just think this is one of the reasons what makes Man City special, that they're bringing a player that is so well appreciated by the fans, bringing people down to join together. Sean's key word during that whole interview was that Man City is a family. That was the phrase. And today we have that in a microcosm with the Southeast teams all here, out here. It does feel like a family. It doesn't matter whether they're from Tennessee, whether they're from Alabama, whether they're from Florida, or whether they're from here in Georgia. It feels like a family. And even though we're not Sky Blues ourselves, it's almost like we're part of it.
We were welcomed in. I think we can be like distant cousins or something. We'll be okay. Thanks to everybody for making us feel like part of the family today. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. Thank you to the Brewhouse Cafe here in Little 5 Points. It's been a fun night.
It's been fantastic, and the fun doesn't stop here. Anyone that's interested, again, there's events all over the shop. This event, I'm sure, is going on later on into the night. Tomorrow morning, if you fancy it, bright and early, 7:30 a.m. at the Brewhouse. Then it's on to West End Station Soccer. So the fun doesn't stop. If you want to get involved and feel this Man City vibe, whether it's as a Man City friend or if it's as a distant cousin, even I'm sure they'll put their arm around you and it'll be okay. So come out, enjoy the fun, because like we say, this is a once in a while experience to be a part of.
Yeah, very cool. Their game kicks off tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. Set those early alarms. And then follow everybody to Station Soccer, especially if you've never seen that project. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. Thanks, everybody who are listening at home. And we will be talking to you on Monday night for our next soccer over there. Here from the Brewhouse, 7 to 9 p.m. Monday night. Mucha plata, y'all.